These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery, CBD for sleep and pain relief. More info is available at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Ground News, a well-rounded perspective for newsreaders. More info at ground.news/Tom. Angie, for any project on your to-do list. More info at angie.com. Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com. And ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom.
Book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Case Against George W. Bush by Stephen C. Markoff, with a foreword by Richard Clark. This is from the foreword. For some Americans, George W. Bush looks good by comparison to the incumbent, Donald Trump. In his post-presidency, Bush has devoted himself to worthy causes and acted in a bipartisan manner. The 43rd president should, however, be judged not by comparison to America's worst president, nor by what Bush may have done after leaving office. He should be evaluated for his actions in office, his nonfeasance, misfeasance, and malfeasance. This volume from Stephen Markoff provides the evidence for such an evaluation. You can judge for yourself. For me, there is little doubt. I, unfortunately, witnessed Bush and his administration make many of their most cataclysmic decisions. I was in the room when some of them occurred. When in December 2000, the Supreme Court of the United States decided on a 5-4 vote that George W. Bush would become the 43rd president, I was the Special Assistant to the President for National Security and National Coordinator for Security and Counterterrorism for President William J. Clinton. I anticipated leaving the White House on January 20th, 2001, when the Clinton presidency ended. However, I was asked by the incoming administration to stay on for an unspecified period because, as it was explained to me, there was no one on Bush's incoming team who knew much about terrorism or who wanted my job. Departing Clinton administration officials stressed to the newly arriving Bush team and to Bush himself the importance and urgency of dealing with the al-Qaeda terrorist threat. Indeed, the Clinton administration had developed an extensive series of further steps to combat al-Qaeda that it would have taken had it continued in office, or indeed had Vice President Al Gore assumed office in 2001. Within days of Bush's inauguration, I asked for an urgent meeting at the cabinet level to review both the threat and the plan to ratchet up the measures against al-Qaeda. No such meeting occurred until a week before 9/11, and that meeting was inconclusive. From January 2001 through the second week in September, Bush personally received frequent intelligence warnings that al-Qaeda posed an imminent threat. He convened no meetings to address the issue. His inner circle of national security advisors did nothing, despite frequent urgings by the CIA director and the national coordinator, including such vivid imagery as our asking in writing that they consider a near future in which there would be hundreds of dead bodies in the streets of America. Instead, they focused on Iraq and the regime of Saddam Hussein. Bush's nonfeasance cost American lives. Following the deaths of over 3,000 innocent civilians on 9/11, the Bush administration attempted to tie the al-Qaeda attack to Iraq, which had nothing to do with it. Despite CIA and FBI analyses that reiterated Iraq's non-involvement, the Bush administration almost immediately followed the 9/11 attack by beginning to make plans to invade Iraq. Senior Bush officials spoke privately of the need to demonstrate our strength in the wake of the 9/11 attack, show our might by destroying the largest army in the Middle East, and thereby also prove our willingness to take U.S. military casualties to achieve our ends. Prior to 9/11, foreign terrorists who had attacked Americans had been successfully sought out throughout the world and arrested by U.S. law enforcement authorities, assisted by the intelligence community. Many terrorists had been returned to U.S. territory, given their Miranda rights, provided with counsel, tried in our civilian criminal courts, convicted, sentenced, and incarcerated in maximum security prison cells. One, tried by the Commonwealth of Virginia, was executed. Despite this record, the Bush administration abandoned criminal process and established its own extrajudicial system for dealing with terrorists post 9/11. That new system used techniques that any objective observer would judge were torture. Perhaps the most well-known torture technique was the procedure known as waterboarding. The United States government had tried World War II Japanese military personnel for using the exact same technique. They were found guilty, and some were executed by hanging. The United States Senate's Committee on Intelligence conducted the most extensive oversight and investigation and examination in its history on the issue of torture during the Bush administration. That voluminous study concluded that torture was employed and that had not, despite administration claims to the contrary, uniquely revealed information that had prevented terrorist attacks. To the contrary, it showed that tortured prisoners, unable to satisfy their interrogators with information that the terrorists did not know, instead guessed at what kind of story would stop the torture and then fabricated information of the kind they thought their prosecutors wanted to hear. Bush was not only aware of the torture, he approved it. His role in giving authorization for such acts can rightly be considered criminal malfeasance, as should his orders to invade Iraq. Among the many justifications the Bush administration considered for their invasion and occupation of Iraq, they chose finally to make the alleged weapons of mass destruction existence their chief complaint. The book, The Case Against George W. Bush by Stephen C.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, TGIF, Shabbat Shalom, Juma Mubarak, happy Friday to you. It's Anything Goes Friday. No guests today, just you and me all day. I've got a pile of stories that I'm going to just kind of sprinkle throughout the program. Of course, my rant from today's Hartmann Report, Trump and his dead-enders hateful plan revealed. I'll get to that in a second. And also, why do we beg billionaires to do the right thing when we should just tax them higher so government can do the right thing? William Shatner weighs in on this, apparently. We'll get to that in the first hour. And also, conservatives wanting to teach an alternative to the Holocaust. We'll get to that. In our second hour, how do you think Liz Cheney feels about Citizens United now that a billionaire is bankrolling her primary opponent? And Louise keeps telling me all week that the stores are emptying. Are you noticing this too? We'll get into that in the second hour, or anytime you want. Mansion and Cinema, also, the news is worse than you know. I'll give you the details next hour. And in our third hour, Shameful and Dangerous. An Oklahoma woman is facing 4 years in prison for having had a miscarriage. Seriously. I'll give you the details, but this is the direction we're going. This is absolutely the direction we're going. But to start out, it's, what are Trump and his dead-enders really up to? In my opinion, their agenda is very easily explained. Where'd my camera go? Oh, there it is. Is very easily explained, and that is that number one, destroy democracy, right? And the whole idea of the voters deciding who their president is, and I mean, to the extent I suppose we've already ended that. George W. Bush lost by 500,000 votes, but he still became president. Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump by 3 million votes, but Donald Trump still became president. So anyhow, number one, end democracy in America. And number two, turn this country into an authoritarian oligarchy. I laid this out in The Hidden History of American Oligarchy in that book, and it's so clear. They want to turn America into something that looks like Hungary or Russia. I mean, it's just very, very straightforward. Step one is to end free and fair elections in America. I got this fundraising email from Donald Trump on Wednesday, I think it was, of this week. And it said, if we don't solve the presidential election fraud of 2020, which we have thoroughly and conclusively documented, Republicans will not be voting in 22 or 24. It's the single most important thing for Republicans to do. So the media treated this like Trump is either threatening other Republicans to do something that they don't understand, or he's just being a testy, grumpy billionaire, right? He wants them to love him more, or he's just losing his grip. Neither of those things are true. What Trump was actually saying in that email that I got and that, became national news was, if the rest of you Republicans who still hold office don't do like a couple of states have already done and pre-rig the 2024 Electoral College election result, you're going to lose office and you're going to lose power. And I'll, Donald Trump, lose my chance to get back into the White House. Which is true, by the way, particularly in swing states. For example, in 2004, Texas, now this is based on births, Texas ceased to be a white majority state. Texas became a minority majority state in 2004. Well, in 2024, those people, those babies born in 2004 will be 20 years old and they'll be eligible to vote in the 2024 election for the first time. And you think they're going to vote for white supremacist Republicans? This is why the Republicans are stepping up their game. You know, they've used this canard of election fraud forever to try to suppress the vote of BIPOC folks, urban folks, poor folks, young folks, elderly people. Now they're going a whole nother step farther and passing laws that, in addition to the normal, barriers to voting, passing laws that basically say that election officials can simply throw out the results if they don't like them. This is not a good thing. I mean, this is what Joe Stalin told his personal secretary back, in the 1920s. He said, quote, "I consider it completely unimportant who in the party will vote or how. But what is extremely important is this: who will count the votes and how." Yeah, I mean, this is what Republicans are doing right now. And this is the essence, by the way, of John Eastman's memo, the one that came out of the White House just before January 6th, where he basically said, he laid out what I laid out in March of last year. I predicted Trump was going to do this 9 months before he did. I said he's going to try to replay the 1876 election, where the election, or the 1824 or the 1800 election, all three of those elections got thrown to the House of Representatives because there wasn't a clear majority of electoral votes. And there wasn't a clear majority of electoral votes in the election of 1876. I mean, there was a clear majority, but it wasn't enough to push it over the 50% number in 1876 because 4 states submitted incomplete ballots or conflicting ballots. Actually, in each case, it was conflicting ballots. Oregon and 3 southern states, submitted ballots both for Tilden and for Hayes. And that's, I wrote about this, I talked about this on the air, and sure enough, it's exactly what Trump tried to do. And now they're going to try and do it again in 2024, whether it's for Trump or some other Republican. They're setting this up in the states all across the United States. And they're being supported now by right-wing billionaires and big corporations. One of the better documentarians of this is Judd Legum over at popular.info, where he's been, bullet pointing in his stories about crazy Republican positions, which corporations are supporting these Republicans. And it's a whole pile of them. It's just like Fritz Tyson, who wrote the book, I Paid Hitler. You don't need democracy to make money. In fact, the country that has produced the most billionaires in the last 20 years is China. China is not a democracy. So these guys are like, we don't care about democracy. We just want to stay billionaires. And now you've got in Montana, the Republicans in the Montana legislature passed Senate Bill 319, which says a political committee may not direct, coordinate, manage, or conduct any voter identification efforts, voter registration drives, signature collection efforts, ballot collection efforts, or voter turnout efforts for federal, state, or local or school elections inside, basically, on a college campus. The classrooms, obviously, you can't do electioneering in the classroom, so they say you can't do it inside a residence hall, a dining facility, or athletic facility. Really, it's against the law now to campaign on a college campus in Montana? And Georgia, Arkansas, Kansas, Arizona, Texas, and Florida are all considering similar legislation right now. In Georgia, they're actually removing election officials. The New York Times reported across Georgia, many members of at least 10 county election boards have been removed, had their positions eliminated, or are likely to be kicked off through local ordinances or new laws passed by the state legislature. At least 5 are people of color. Most are Democrats. Surprise, surprise. 19 Republican-controlled states have passed 30 pieces of legislation to make it harder for Social Security-age people to vote, college-age people to vote, and BIPOC folks to vote. And in many of those states, politicians who are now in charge of elections can just refuse to certify the election if they don't like it. And as I said, what are they trying to do? They're trying to replace democracy in this republic with an authoritarian oligarchy, with a strongman oligarchy along the lines of Hungary or Russia. And frankly, given the demographic changes, I mentioned Texas a minute ago, this really is probably going to be their last chance. Young people are coming into their own in huge numbers, and they are pissed that nothing's being done about the climate, among other things. So what are these guys doing now? Now they're funding right-wing groups that are running around with black flags saying, we're willing to kill our neighbors. We think that a civil war is happening already. We got the guns and we're ready to shoot. This is the no surrender, no quarter black flag. I talked about this yesterday. Michelle Davis, writing for the Living Blue in Texas blog, writes, the title of her blog is, "Are your Republican neighbors planning on killing you?" The answer, she writes, is yes. They say civil war, and they say it's already started. And she brings the footage to back up her assertion. I mean, there's a book about this. It came out in 2005. It's titled Black Flag Over Dixie, Racial Atrocities and Reprisals in the Civil War. The Confederate soldiers who flew the black flag were the ones who were engaged in massacres of African Americans. This is like right straight out of the Turner Diaries. And then Steve Bannon this week, you know, Donald Trump this week is echoing Hitler turning the widow of one of the men who died in his beer hall putsch into a national martyr. Donald Trump is doing the same thing now with Ashley Babbitt, who died at the Capitol, was killed by a police officer, and just like the person that Hitler did. And now and then yesterday they were saluting the flag, pledging allegiance to the flag from January 6th, which is what Hitler did with the flag that they carried when they tried to take over the capital, the Bavarian state capital in Munich in 1922 or 23. They turned that into an iconic totem, the blood-stained flag, they called it. And now Steve Bannon, you know, you'll recall, you know, Hitler said that once he was well established, there would be, you know, the Third Reich would produce 1,000 years of peace. Steve Bannon comes out and says, we're putting together a coalition that's going to govern for 100 years. Are we there yet? We're getting close. And this is probably going to be their last chance, 2022 and 2024. And we can't let that happen. I'll be back with your calls after this. Sticker. And just a quick note about, you know, Prince William and William Shatner, and then I'll pick up your calls. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. You and me all 3 hours. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Robert in Kimberly, Oregon. Hey, Robert, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Yesterday you mentioned a company in Oregon making iron flow batteries.
Yeah.
ESS. Yeah, there's a YouTube content creator that made a really cool, in-depth story about that company that they published just this morning. Really nice work. And it was pretty interesting, really cool, good stuff.
So what's the essence of it, Robert? Tell us how this works.
Salt and iron creates the electrolyte that gets charged with wind or solar and is used when wind or the sun.
Yeah, your phone is breaking up, Robert. But so basically these batteries are using salt and iron, which are two of the most abundant elements on Earth.
Right.
That's incredible.
Yep.
That's great.
They're large. They're container, shipping container size batteries.
Oh, I know. They're some of them. They're making smaller ones for home use, but it's not the size of but are still very large, right? They're like the size of a furnace.
They're quote unquote commercial grade for wind farms and solar farms.
Oh, I
at
see.
At least at this stage.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I thought they
so
were making them for homes.
Out here above the Columbia River with all the windmills and the solar panels, you could have these containers, set up to receive the power from the wind and the sun,
sure.
And then in the off hours.
Right. Yeah, very cool.
Did you know there's a three-wheel vehicle company making electric vehicles in Eugene?
In Eugene, Oregon? No, I didn't know that. Are they selling them all over the country, or is it just a local thing?
Yeah, well, they're ramping up, of course, with supply chain and whatnot.
Yeah.
But they're a bit like a enclosed motorcycle. They're called Arcimoto.
Uh-huh.
And they have essentially two different varieties. One is for two people and one is for a driver, and then storage where the second person would normally ride, like for delivering pizzas or meals or the first responders, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they're narrow and they're a lot of fun. I drove one over the summer. It's just amazing.
Fascinating stuff. Robert, thank you. Thank you for the information.
There's a three-wheel.
Oh, go ahead.
There's a three-wheel company in San Diego that's making more of a traditional car, not very traditional, but solar paneled electric car called Aptera that actually was around about 10 years ago, and they restarted their program, and it's a really neat program.
Didn't I don't recall if it was Tesla or Toyota, one of the companies, this was 2-3 years ago, rolled out a car that had a roof that was solar panels. Did that just die?
Well, I think about 10 years ago it was Aptera. Elon doesn't believe that solar will charge the car enough. But
well, this was just. I think the purpose of this was so that if you don't drive your car very often, it'll keep your batteries charged. It'll just top them off.
Well, that's what this Aptera does. It looks more like an airplane. It's a really slick design, and all the upper surfaces, except for the windscreen, is covered with panels.
Very interesting. Okay, Robert, thank you. Thanks for watching us on Twitter Live. I think you're our first Twitter caller. That's great. Thank you very much.
Tom.
All righty, we'll be back. It's 21 minutes past the hour. Stick around. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Hey, we've got a new video up over at thomhartmann.com about Big Mail-In. You heard about this? Now, I'm not talking about the George Bernard Shaw play that got made into the movie My Fair Lady and all that kind of stuff. No, this is a PR firm in France. And, you know, when you hear from Americans that, oh, we could never put Donald Trump in jail because only third world countries do that. France is not only not a third world country, they're our oldest ally. And they just convicted their former president for the second time of fraud and corruption around the way he was running his campaigns. Nicolas Sarkozy. They just convicted him a second time. Now, he's appealing both of them. He's, walking around with an ankle bracelet. But, I've got all the details on this video over at thomhartmann.com. You can check it out. But, again, next time somebody says, we can't put Trump in jail, tell them, hey, France did. And welcome back. Okay, just one quick note here. Both Prince William and Captain Kirk have spoken. William Shatner, who's a Canadian citizen, by the way, which, so probably they're beating him up for that over on right-wing sites right now. I could just imagine what the right-wing talk radio guys are going. He says, this is amazing. William Shatner, he says, I wish I had better news and more entertainment and jokes to tell you, but I was moved to tears by what I saw in outer space. He said, I came back filled and overwhelmed with sadness and empathy for this beautiful thing we call Earth. We're at the tipping point. We haven't got time to wait 30 years and argue about a few $1 billion. Burying your head in the sand another instant about global warming and the destruction of the planet is suicide for us all. And then Prince William, the son of Diana and Prince Charles, says something very similar. He said, we need some of the world's greatest brains and minds fixed on trying to repair the planet, not trying to find the next place to go and live. He is now 39 years old. Boy, how rapidly they grow up. And William Shatner adds, the fragility of this planet, the coming catastrophic event, we all need to clean this act up now. Amen. Jerry in San Francisco. It's Anything Goes Friday. Jerry, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. Listen, while I was on hold, I was hearing some breakup, too, so you might want to check stuff on your end.
Okay.
My modest proposal for the end of the week is for the Democrats to just focus very specifically, like Stacey Abrams did in Georgia, on Mariposa County, Wayne County, which includes Detroit, Milwaukee, Atlanta, and Philadelphia.
Well, these are all cities and swing states with large black populations, and they are all the focus of the Trump so-called audit efforts. Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to suppress the vote, the largely black vote, in those counties. And if they can do that, those swing states cease to be swing states. They become blue states or red states.
Right. And if whoever it is, if it's Biden, whoever carries those 5, then no matter what they do in other states, the Democrats still win.
Right.
And I think we have very little time to challenge those voter restrictions and just the out and out harassment and so forth. It is very scary. I mean, Mariposa County doesn't even have voting machines after the crazy group that took the voting machines all summer long.
Yeah, Maricopa County.
Half the people said they're not coming back. Voting officials said in Arizona they're not coming back. They've been threatened too much. Yeah. One woman actually was threatened and found out who was threatening her. The FBI has been on it for 5 months, and she can't get any kind of resolution. As far as she knows, they didn't do anything.
Yeah. Well, and then you can lay that at the feet of Merrick Garland, which takes us back to our conversation with Sarah Kendzior yesterday.
That was really good. And by the way, I just want to say for everybody to check out ThomHartmann.com. I think it was Thursday or Wednesday that you had the conceptual frameworks of how fascism came through and so forth. It was really, really.
Oh, you mean
good.
HartmannReport.com?
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, HartmannReport.
Which is a daily newsletter that comes into your email box for free. There's no ads in it or anything.
It was great.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jerry. Thank you very much. We put a lot of work into those things, and in fact, this morning. Today's piece, I finished up the first draft last night. We went to bed. We got up this morning, and I struggled with it for an hour trying to pare it down. It's still a little too, bloated, I think, but, trying to get it just right. And so it got published a little later than normal. But that's what Louise and I are doing now every day. Jerry, thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you. I appreciate it. And I'm totally with you. These individual counties, it's not even the states, it's these counties that are mostly big city counties that have large black populations. This is what the Republicans are trying to destroy.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
These counties are the targets of their voter suppression laws. These counties are the targets of their audits. They didn't audit Arizona. They audited one county, Maricopa County. They're trying to do the same thing all over the country. Book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Case Against George W. Bush by Stephen C. Markoff, with a foreword by Richard Clark. This is from the foreword. For some Americans, George W. Bush looks good by comparison to the incumbent, Donald Trump. In his post-presidency, Bush has devoted himself to worthy causes and acted in a bipartisan manner. The 43rd president should, however, be judged not by comparison to America's worst president, nor by what Bush may have done after leaving office. He should be evaluated for his actions in office, his nonfeasance, misfeasance, and malfeasance. This volume from Stephen Markoff provides the evidence for such an evaluation. You can judge for yourself. For me, there is little doubt. I, unfortunately, witnessed Bush and his administration make many of their most cataclysmic decisions. I was in the room when some of them occurred. When in December 2000, the Supreme Court of the United States decided on a 5-4 vote that George W. Bush would become the 43rd president, I was the Special Assistant to the President for National Security and National Coordinator for Security and Counterterrorism for President William J. Clinton. I anticipated leaving the White House on January 20th, 2001, when the Clinton presidency ended. However, I was asked by the incoming administration to stay on for an unspecified period because, as it was explained to me, there was no one on Bush's incoming team who knew much about terrorism or who wanted my job. Departing Clinton administration officials stressed to the newly arriving Bush team and to Bush himself the importance and urgency of dealing with the al-Qaeda terrorist threat. Indeed, the Clinton administration had developed an extensive series of further steps to combat al-Qaeda that it would have taken had it continued in office, or indeed had Vice President Al Gore assumed office in 2001. Within days of Bush's inauguration, I asked for an urgent meeting at the cabinet level to review both the threat and the plan to ratchet up the measures against al-Qaeda. No such meeting occurred until a week before 9/11, and that meeting was inconclusive. From January 2001 through the second week in September, Bush personally received frequent intelligence warnings that al-Qaeda posed an imminent threat. He convened no meetings to address the issue. His inner circle of national security advisors did nothing, despite frequent urgings by the CIA director and the national coordinator, including such vivid imagery as our asking in writing that they consider a near future in which there would be hundreds of dead bodies in the streets of America. Instead, they focused on Iraq and the regime of Saddam Hussein. Bush's nonfeasance cost American lives. Following the deaths of over 3,000 innocent civilians on 9/11, the Bush administration attempted to tie the al-Qaeda attack to Iraq, which had nothing to do with it. Despite CIA and FBI analyses that reiterated Iraq's non-involvement, the Bush administration almost immediately followed the 9/11 attack by beginning to make plans to invade Iraq. Senior Bush officials spoke privately of the need to demonstrate our strength in the wake of the 9/11 attack, show our might by destroying the largest army in the Middle East, and thereby also prove our willingness to take U.S. military casualties to achieve our ends. Prior to 9/11, foreign terrorists who had attacked Americans had been successfully sought out throughout the world and arrested by U.S. law enforcement authorities assisted by the intelligence community. Many terrorists had been returned to U.S. territory, given their Miranda rights, provided with counsel, tried in our civilian criminal courts, convicted, sentenced, and incarcerated in maximum security prison cells. One, tried by the Commonwealth of Virginia, was executed. Despite this record, the Bush administration abandoned criminal process and established its own extrajudicial system for dealing with terrorists post 9/11. That new system used techniques that any objective observer would judge were torture. Perhaps the most well-known torture technique was the procedure known as waterboarding. The United States government had tried World War II Japanese military personnel for using the exact same technique. They were found guilty, and some were executed by hanging. The United States Senate's Committee on Intelligence conducted the most extensive oversight and investigation and examination in its history on the issue of torture during the Bush administration. That voluminous study concluded that torture was employed and that it had not, despite administration claims to the contrary, uniquely revealed information that had prevented terrorist attacks. To the contrary, it showed that tortured prisoners, unable to satisfy their interrogators with information that the terrorists did not know, instead guessed at what kind of story would stop the torture and then fabricated information of the kind they thought their prosecutors wanted to hear. Bush was not only aware of the torture, he approved it. His role in giving authorization for such acts can rightly be considered criminal malfeasance, as should his orders to invade Iraq. Among the many justifications the Bush administration considered for their invasion and occupation of Iraq, they chose finally to make the alleged weapons of mass destruction existence their chief complaint. The book, The Case Against George W. Bush by Stephen C. Markoff. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. 34 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Anything Goes Friday. Russ in Hickory Hill, Illinois. Hey, Russ, what's up?
Nothing, Tom. Why I call is, we always talk about the two idiots, West Virginia and Arizona. What we forget about, how about Angus King in Maine? He's over there. I don't know if I can raise the debt ceiling because the filibuster means that much to me. How come we ain't bringing these guys up? Well,
there's about 6 Democratic senators. I mean, Angus King was a Republican who became an independent. He caucuses with the Democrats now, but he's not a progressive by any stretch of the imagination. He's not. He's sort of Susan Collins light. I mean, he's got some good positions. I don't mean to criticize Angus King.
Well, I'm just saying that's what he said, though, Tom.
Yeah.
He said that the red line for him is the filibuster or raising the debt ceiling. Yeah. He'd rather see the country kind of default. That was his word. Yeah. Oh, who's the guy in Delaware? Coons. Is that their
Chris
senator?
Coons. Yeah.
He's another one that says, I don't know about anything. We've got to get rid of the moderate Democrats, Tom. They're becoming squishy
It is becoming a process, Russ. 10 years ago, the progressives, the people who refused to take corporate PAC money, were just a handful of Democrats. In fact, even in the Progressive Caucus, 10, 15 years ago, there was only a couple dozen people in the Progressive Caucus, and not all of them refused to take PAC money. Now it's almost 100 people out of I don't recall the exact number that they have, 230 something in the House. 5 short of, or 5 more than needed to hold a majority, and this is going to be a big battle in 2022. But, this is fairly widespread as a result of Citizens United. What you're seeing is an American political landscape that was remade by a series of Supreme Court decisions. In opposition, by the way, to laws that were passed by, elected politicians back in the 70s to clean up politics. And so, we have this corrupted political system. It shouldn't surprise us that there's a bunch of corrupted people in it. So I'm with you, Russ.
Well, what I wanted to ask you, Tom? I don't know if you heard this. You talk about gerrymandering. Now it's Ottawa. If this is true, the governor of New York, there's 8 House seats. Supposedly she took 5 of them and said, I'm redistricting you in the Democratic territory. She said, and they asked her why. She said, because I can. We own the state. Now, that's what I call standing up for the Democrats. That's, what they do to us, she said, we're going to do to them.
Well, if that story is true, God bless her. And that's, that's what's going on here in Oregon. The Democrats came out with a map. The Republicans said, oh, my God, you get, because we get one new congressional seat here because of the census. So we're going from 5 to 6. And the Democrats came up with a map that gives 1 Republican seat and 5 Democratic seats, which actually reflects the population of the state. But it's got the Republicans hysterical. And so then the Democrats came back and said, oh, well, we'll compromise with you. And I'm going, what? Stop. What the hell? Don't even think like that. But, there they go. Russ, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Kevin in Cedar Lake, Indiana. Hey, Kevin, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how are you?
Good.
I hope everything's okay.
Yeah.
You had a caller about a week and a half ago who had an excellent thing, a statement that wearing a mask is not a political statement. It's an IQ test.
Yeah, I remember.
And I wanted to add to that being vaccinated is the beta test for the quality of your humanity.
I would agree.
Yeah. And I just got my Pfizer booster, and basically the whole thing about this in white ring, I call it white ring now, white ring insanity, is that these people cannot and will not understand that the society they live in is a reflection not only of what they believe or what they fear or what they act on, it's what everybody else does as well.
Yeah.
That the quality of our society is based on what we do and not by the quantity of things that we have. And that is, I think, the biggest difference between the reactionary Taliban American Party called the Republicans and the true progressive, people who want to have a world worth living in.
But, Kevin, there's no such thing as society, don't you know? Milton Friedman said that in 1961. What's her name? Margaret Thatcher in the UK echoed that in 1978 or 79. She said there's no such thing as society. There's just a collection of individuals.
That's a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah, it really is, but this is their governing philosophy.
That's what we have to call it out for. And don't call it QAnon, call it QAnon nonsense.
Yeah.
Whenever Donald Trump lies, don't say, oh, he's misspeaking or something like that. He's lying to you. He's a drug and a pusher at the same time,
Yeah.
And that's my view, my philosophy and my viewpoint. And I just wanted to get that out there and add it to the body politic. Whenever we try to have, whenever a human body does not have regulation or balance or harmony in it, it becomes cancerous and toxic. The same thing is happening to our society, the body politic. And we need to be the surgeons as well as the medicine. And being vaccinated, wearing a mask, doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason is the clearest and most sane way to deal with an insane world. And I just wanted to say
I'm with you. And the Republicans who are willing to kill people or to encourage people to get sick and die in order to create chaos to hurt Democrats for the 2022 and 24 election are
suicide on their part.
They are, well, and that's beyond, I mean, you know, ethically and morally, it's beyond deplorable. Kevin, thank you for the call. Bob in Marseille, Illinois. Hey, Bob, or is it Marseille or Marcel's?
It's Marseille's because nobody here can speak French.
Okay, so what's up, Bob?
Well, in any event, I'm just wondering about where the people they're hiring for the media, what schools they're coming from. Basically, the last 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks has been awful. Facebook, they're trying to figure out what Facebook did wrong and what went wrong. Nothing went wrong. It's a for-profit corporation. He figured out how to program his computers to optimize his bottom line at the expense of his customers, and basically that's a capitalist system. They didn't do anything wrong. They did everything right. When I was a kid, we mailed letters, and you didn't have to worry about it. It was a government-run or semi-government-run operation, and the letters usually got where they were going, and it was like that before I was a kid. Yeah. When my dad mailed a letter from a POW camp in Germany, it would get to his mother in New York, and my grandmother would call around and write around the country to some of his friends and other relatives, and basically it all worked.
Yeah, and it's a whole different world now with social media, and right. Like you're absolutely right. They're tweaking the algorithm to provoke outrage, and that's not a good thing. Just to make money.
Yeah, nobody asked the question about whether we should have a profit corporation in Zucker's position. Yeah. And last week we got to the longshoremen's agreement, right? Mm-hmm. And the port closings. And all of a sudden the president, an executive in our federal government, went into a free market system, supposedly all for-profit free market companies involved in our distribution chain.
Well, except that the port is actually owned by the city of Los Angeles, I believe, and maybe it's the federal government. And ports are regulated by the federal government.
All right. Well, the port may be. But who got adjusted in that agreement that all of a sudden it went to 24 hours? Shouldn't that work automatically? And
I think it should, Bob. I think it should. And I need to move along. Thank you very much for everything you had to say. Jessica in Chicago. Hey, Jessica, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. We're on the same wavelength. Let's change the slogan to stop the lie and wear it with blue shirts and drowned out stop the still. And Tom, I love that I came across an article that you will love, and everyone should Google this. It's archive.vanityfair.com, and the article is After the Gold Rush, Vanity Fair in September 1990. And this is when Trump states in the article that he tells a lie over and over till everyone believes it.
Really?
Oh, yes. Whoa. You've got to Google this. Trump in 1990 states that
After the Gold Rush is the title of the article?
After the Gold Rush in Vanity Fair's September 1990 issue.
Right.
And if you just Google archive.vanityfair.com, it comes up.
Yeah.
And Trump admits he lies in 1990.
Wow.
So
and this
we
is
should be getting that out there.
Yeah, I'm with you. And this is what FDR called out. If you can open the 360 here, Sean. This is what FDR called out way back in the day.
Remember, a number of years ago, there was a book, Mein Kampf, written by Hitler himself. The technique was all set out in Hitler's book, and it was copied by the aggressors of Italy and Japan. According to that technique, you should never use a small falsehood, always a big one, for its very fantastic nature would make it more credible. If only you keep repeating it over and over and over again.
So apparently, Jessica, Donald Trump took that to heart.
This is out there in his own words, Trump's own words. He says he lies.
Yeah.
We need to get this out everywhere.
Yeah,
and I'm proud of Republicans who put...
Finish your thought, Jessica.
Republicans put up all over Trump lost.
Oh, yeah, those billboards. Yeah, the Republican something or other project.
Yeah.
Yep.
When the cousins come over for Thanksgiving, stop the lie is my shirt.
There you go.
Stop the lie.
Okay, Jessica, I got to run. Thank you. It's 46 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's Anything Goes Friday all day. And back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. And welcome back. George in Chicago. Boy, it's a big Chicago day. Hey, George, what's up?
Oh, everything's up. It's so good to talk to you.
Thank you.
After listening to William Shatner last night, I was inspired to share this rant with you. It's not violence that we see, it's the low morality in the institutes, the government, the society. It's a fad to dress stylish and act childish and get high on your fellow man, leaving him stranded in dire poverty, trying to pay the taxes on your shallow joy. You better have your own, sucker, I heard one shout as he placed his hand in the other's pocket and came out with the Star-Spangled Banner, a dollar bill to spend in the marketplace on an inflated bag of drugs, medicine for a sick society, trying to make it like a junkie who swears he's cleaning up, but has the needle still dangling from his arm.
George, I discourage people from reading on the air. What's the point you're trying to make?
I'm trying to make the point that if we don't do this, we don't fulfill our efforts to do something positive and clean up what's happening in America, America won't exist any longer.
Yeah, I am with you. And that's beautiful prose, by the way, that you were reading. Forgive my interrupting, but like I said, we've got this kind of standing policy of not reading things on the air. But I encourage you to try and get that published. That's brilliant. So
yeah, it's a brilliant piece, and it ends with if we don't. I can't even get to the end right.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me just do that.
That's okay, George. Thanks a lot for dropping by today. Thanks for the call. Kathy in Lansing, Michigan. Hey, Kathy, what's on your mind today?
Hi. Question. I seem to remember Ivanka getting 3 patents late in this in his term, and one of them was for caskets, and one of them was for voting machines
Correct.
from China. And I'm wondering if Maricopa County is going to have to replace their voting machines, and the Republicans will replace them with Ivanka machines.
Wouldn't that be wild? As far as I know, Kathy, Ivanka has not made use of any of the patents that she was gifted by the Chinese government in exchange for all the favors that Donald Trump was showering on them. But who knows? I'm pretty sure, though, that they're going to be going back to, ES&S or Diebold, or if Diebold is still in the business, I think they might be out now, or Dominion. You know, the company that is countersuing all the people who are saying that their machines were rigged or hacked or whatever.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. You know, it is a bizarre commentary, though, on the Trump presidency, and one that is nowhere, you know, is never highlighted as well and as much as it should be. That, you know, Trump was just running this massive grift. He was, you know, constantly figuring out ways to shovel money into his own pocket, whether it was, you know, out of country potentates coming and staying at the Trump Hotel, or whether it was the Chinese government giving Ivanka patents, or, you know, whatever it may be. I mean, he was figuring out ways to make. I believe that, you know, nobody's been able to quantify it to the best of my knowledge, but I believe that Trump probably made hundreds of billions or hundreds of millions of dollars off being president. And right now, he's probably making $100 million every 3 or 4 months. I'm getting literally 7 or 8 fundraising emails every day from him. We'll be right back. So we've got a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program about the 14th Amendment and the debt ceiling. And you know, just kind of riddle me this one, Batman, right? The 14th Amendment reads, and I'm taking out the parts that specifically refer to pensions and bounties, you know, for services suppressing the insurrection, because it came out of the Civil War. But the 14th Amendment reads, in part, the validity of the public debt of the United States shall not be questioned. In other words, Congress, you can't take actions that might cause the public debt not to be paid. You can't refuse to raise the debt ceiling, is how I read that. The debt ceiling, of course, didn't even exist when they wrote the 14th Amendment. That came along in 1917. But I think this is raising some really important questions, and I dig into it in this video over there. You can check it out. It's all over at thomhartmann.com. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. Welcome back. Anything Goes Friday. And Buck in Johnson Creek, Wisconsin. Hey, Buck, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I wanted to share an idea with you on how to get capitalism to create living wage jobs.
Okay.
And the only job I want to create are where the employees are receiving the majority of the revenue generated from their work. And just as the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, my plan basically starts with a single job. It's a job plan that anybody can use, and current companies would find it difficult to compete against. That in the job plan, you're basically making your success opportunity for someone else to create their own job by giving a percentage of the profits to others to start a new business. So you're making a pyramid of businesses that will create more businesses over time, while also giving, like, if you gave 10% of your profits to others to start a business, and you gave 10% of the profits to the community to get the community invested in your business, ensuring the success of your business, having 50% of the profits go to the employees, which I would consider myself one, so I get paid the same as everyone else, and I get my initial investment paid back. So as I'm working, the business really doesn't owe me anything. That you know, as it grows, you're just creating more jobs over time, creating more businesses. And in the end, it's like a win-win for everybody. That you have to realize that it's not the percent that you own of equal value, is the percentage of what you own. And as I do this, I don't have to have it take 90 hours of my time every week. You know, I can trust other people to do their job and motivate them to come in and do their best work.
Yeah, I get it, Buck. You know, it's and there's a lot of options out there, including things like, you know, employee-owned businesses and like that. But interesting idea. I don't want to dig into the details of exactly what you laid out, but it seems like, you know, federal regulation might be a starting point. Anyhow, thank you for the call, Thomas in Mossy Head, Florida. Hey, Thomas, what's up?
Morning, Tom. Hope you're doing well.
I am.
Good. One of my neighbors down the road, like I said, I'm here in the Panhandle, which is totally red, had 2 billboards outside. One of them was F Biden and F you for voting for him. And the other one was Biden is killing us with vaccines. Right. Well, there's a lot of school kids that walk past this every day. I got sick of it, went down there and tore it down. The woman came out armed with an assault rifle and threatened me, so I left and called the police. Went back when the police showed up, and they were going to arrest me for destruction of property. I said, wait a minute, look, it's not on her property. It's out here on the road.
Public space.
And public space, yes. It wasn't on her property. So here she comes again with the AR-15. Cops drew down on her. We tried to get it straightened out. I'm handcuffed at this point. Whoa. And I said, this is not right. It's not her property. And she's screaming and hollering and ended up, long story short, police said, yes, you're in the right, sir, to destroy this. We don't like it either. School kids reading that. And she got real foul with the police, and they arrested her.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. And, here's a question I have for you, because, like I said, in this area...
Yeah, we just got 20 seconds here, Thomas. Right to it.
Okay. I was just wondering if, I see these F. Biden flags in the back of trucks and stuff.
Right.
Is there anything I can do, like call the police and say, this is vulgarity?
Yeah, public obscenity is not typically a crime that is enforced any longer. I mean, it may still be on the books, but I think you'd have a real hard time getting a police officer to do anything about it, or a court, for that matter, to even hold a hearing or a prosecution, a trial of any sort. So, no, I mean, we just have to accept that this is what the right wing in America has descended into. They have descended into something that is so ahistoric, so asocial, so outside the boundaries, the normal boundaries of society, that, it's sad, pathetic, and disgusting. Thomas, thanks for sharing your story with us. It's great to hear from you. And good on you for taking action. I'm glad it worked out well. Whew. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery, CBD for sleep and pain relief. More info is available at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Ground News, a well-rounded perspective for newsreaders. More info at ground.news/Tom. Angie, for any project on your to-do list. More info at Angie.com. Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at Dinovite.com. And ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom.
We're reading today from a book by David Sanger, the Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times national security reporter. The title of the book is The Perfect Weapon, War, Sabotage, and Fear in the Cyber Age. We're reading from the preface. A year into Donald J. Trump's presidency, his defense secretary, Jim Mattis, sent the new commander-in-chief a startling recommendation. With nations around the world threatening to use cyber weapons to bring down America's power grids, cell phone networks, and water supplies, Trump should declare that he's ready to take extraordinary steps to protect the country. If any nation hit America's critical infrastructure with a devastating strike, even a non-nuclear one, it should be forewarned that the United States might reach for a nuclear weapon in response. Like most things in Washington, the recommendation leaked immediately. Excuse me. Many declared it a crazy idea and wild overkill. While nations had turned their cyber weapons against each other dozens of times in recent years, no attack had yet proven to cost a human life, at least directly. Not the American attacks on Iran's and North Korea's weapon programs, not the North Korean attacks on American banks, a famed Hollywood studio, and the British healthcare system, not the Russian attacks in Ukraine, Europe, and then at the core of American democracy. That streak of luck was certain to end soon, but why should Donald Trump or any of his successors take the huge risk of escalating a cyber war by going nuclear? The Pentagon's recommendation, it turned out, was the prelude to other proposals delivered to a president who values toughness and America first to use the nation's powerful cyber weapons far more aggressively. But it was also a reminder of how quickly the fear of devastating cyber attacks has moved from the stuff of science fiction and die-hard movies to the center of American defense strategy. Just over a decade before, in 2007, cyber attacks were missing entirely from the global threat assessment that intelligence agencies prepare each year for Congress. Terrorism topped that list, along with other post-9/11 concerns. Now that hierarchy has been reversed. For several years, a variety of cyber threats, ranging from a paralyzing strike on the nation's cities to a sophisticated effort to undercut public confidence in its institutions, has appeared as the nation's #1 threat on the list. Not since the Soviets tested the bomb in 1949 had the perception of threats facing the nation been revised so quickly. Yet Mattis, who had risen to 4-star status in a career focused in the Middle East, feared that the 2 decades spent chasing al-Qaeda and ISIS around the globe had distracted America from its most potent challenges. Great power competition, not terrorism, is now the primary focus of U.S. national security, he said in early 2018. America's, quote, competitive edge has eroded in every domain of warfare, including the newest one, cyberspace. The nuclear strategy he handed Trump gave voice to an inchoate fear among many in the Pentagon that cyber attacks posed a threat unlike any other, one that we had completely failed to deter. The irony is that the United States remains the world's stealthiest, most skillful cyber power, as the Iranians discovered when their centrifuges spun out of control, and the North Koreans suspected as their missiles fell out of the sky. But the gap is closing. Cyber weapons are so cheap to develop and so easy to hide that they've proven irresistible. And American officials are discovering that in a world in which almost everything is connected, phones, cars, electrical grids, and satellites, everything can be disrupted, if not destroyed. For several years, the thinking inside the Pentagon was that only nations with nuclear weapons could threaten America's existence. Now that assumption is in doubt. In almost every classified Pentagon scenario for how a future confrontation with Russia and China, or even Iran and North Korea might play out, the adversary's first strike against the United States would include a cyber barrage aimed at civilians. It would fry power grids, stop trains, silence cell phones, and overwhelm the internet. In the worst-case scenarios, food and water would begin to run out. Hospitals would turn people away. Separated from their electronics and thus their connections, Americans would panic and turn against one another. The Pentagon is now planning for this scenario because it knows many of its own war plans open with similarly paralyzing cyber attacks against our adversaries, reflecting new strategies to try to win wars before a shot is fired. Glimpses of what this would look like have leaked out in recent years, thanks partly to Edward J. Snowden, partly because of a mysterious group called the Shadow Brokers, suspected of close links to Russian intelligence, obtained terabytes of data containing many of the tools that the National Security Agency used to breach foreign computer networks. It didn't take long for some of those stolen cyber weapons to be shot back at America and its allies in attacks whose bizarre-sounding names, like WannaCry, suddenly appeared in the headlines every week.
Yet the secrecy surrounding these programs obscures most public debate about the wisdom of using them or the risks inherent in losing control of them. The government's silence about America's new arsenal and its implications poses a sharp contrast to the first decades of the nuclear era. The horrific scenes of destruction at Hiroshima and Nagasaki not only seared the national psyche, but made America's destructive capabilities, and soon Russia's and China's, obvious and undeniable. Yet even while the government kept the details classified, how to build atomic weapons, where they are stored, and who has the authority to order their launch, America engaged in a decades-long political debate about when to threaten to use the bomb and whether to ban it. The book, The Perfect Weapon by David E. Sanger.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to Anything Goes Friday. Just a couple of stories I wanted to put on your radar screen here. The first is in Texas, they passed a law. It's called House Bill 3979. And this law, quote, requires multiple perspectives when discussing widely debated and currently controversial issues. So now they are requiring in Texas schools, or at least in this one particular school, this is the Carroll School District, the executive director of curriculum and instruction said, just try to remember the concepts of House Bill 3979 when discussing the Holocaust. Make sure if you have a book on the Holocaust that you have one that has an opposing, that has other perspectives. One teacher asked this school-wide administrator, how do you oppose the Holocaust? Believe me, the administrator said, it has come up. That has come up. Why do conservatives want to teach an alternative to the Holocaust? Obviously, they want to deny what happens when governments flip hard right. It happened in Chile with Pinochet. He killed thousands of people. And this was Milton Friedman's grand experiment for the Chicago School of Economics and libertarianism and neoliberalism. It happened in Germany with Hitler. It happened in Italy with Mussolini. It happened in Spain with Franco. It's happening right now in the Philippines with Marcos. It's starting to happen in India with Modi. You're seeing, obviously it happened in Russia with Putin. It's happened in Hungary with Orban. We're moving in that direction. Poland is moving in that direction very rapidly. Countries all over the world are leaving behind democracy and flipping hard right. And, they'd really rather not point out that very often when that happens, hard right governments kill their own people. It's just like it's what comes along with it, especially when those people protest. So, number one, why conservatives want to teach an alternative to the Holocaust? Because they'd really rather you don't know what happens when governments turn hard right. Number two, how do you think Liz Cheney feels now about Citizens United? There's a major tech billionaire who made his money with Facebook and PayPal and whatnot, who wants to be the patron of the Trump wing of the Republican Party, according to Max Chafkin, a Bloomberg reporter and author of the book The Contrarian, Peter Thiel and Silicon Valley's Pursuit of Power. And he said that this is, they're trying to define Trumpism after Trump. And where does this, Liz Cheney, again, big fan of right-wingers on the Supreme Court, big fan of Citizens United. This particular billionaire donated the maximum to Harriet Hagman, the Trump-backed primary challenger to Representative Liz Cheney of Wyoming. Hagman has continued, by the way, the woman that she's running against in the primary from Wyoming, Hagman, has continued to claim that there are, quote, legitimate questions about what happened during the 2020 election, and she also supported the Arizona so-called election audit. So what do you think now about Citizens United, Liz? I'm wondering, I was going to say, I'm wondering what Republicans across the board are thinking about Citizens United, but obviously the answer is right in front of us. The majority of them love it because it means that their pockets are filling up with gold. There is literally no limit now as a consequence of a series of Supreme Court decisions that hit their peak in 2010 with a 5-4 right-wing, all four so-called liberals dissented, and dissented loudly, with 5 right-wingers on the Supreme Court saying that when a corporation or when a billionaire just pours unlimited amounts of money into political campaigns, that's not corruption, that's not bribery or even attempted bribery, that is merely free speech, and therefore it is protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. You know what is going on here with this whole thing is tragic. I don't know how to define it beyond that, but I think it's just tragic. So anyhow, picking up your phone calls here, Dennis in Bergenfield Field, New Jersey. Hey, Dennis, what's up?
Hello. Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Well, sort of. It sounds kind of muffled, but no, I can't hear you now. Dennis, I'm going to put you on hold, and you can work that out with Joyce. Charles in Miami. Hey, Charles, what's up? Charles? No Charles.
Hello?
Hey, Charles, you're on the air.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, how you doing, Tom? Just listening to what you're saying about, Citizens United and everything like that. And when I heard lately that these congressmen and senators are saying that they have to, they spend most of their time making phone calls to get donations for their campaigns. I just said, whoever thought that they could make up a law to receive kickbacks, and that would be their only job.
Right.
Whatever congressman that was, or senator, that was brilliant. That's brilliant because they're only taking care of themselves at this point, and forget about everyone else that voted for them. But
yeah, it was an evolutionary process, actually, Charles. It's come and gone throughout American history, but it really started becoming a thing, in the late 1970s, and in particular with the 1980 election of Ronald Reagan. But back to you.
Right. Oh, thank you. I wanted to call about your topic yesterday, but I just wanted to say shortly that I also wanted you to include American climate refugees into the discussion about these foreign people owning property and then raising everyone's taxes because of their properties. They're inflating the prices. But what's bothered me the most is I think the day before you was talking about Manchin, and you were saying that we shouldn't worry about Manchin. You were saying or we can't push him to the point where he turns Republican. And I got to ask you right now, honestly, what's the difference? I mean, it's been
the difference is control of the Senate right now.
And what he is doing right now, and then if he does turn Republican, what we need to do is we need to set up an offensive right now against Sinema and Manchin and Coons that the other guy was talking about earlier, because you have corporate Democrats that's wrecking what everybody came out to vote for. Even Republicans voted with us, I'm sure, because they want a change in this country. And part of the reason why we don't get a change, and some Republicans will never vote Democrat, is because we just show our weakness. And part of it, of course, is the turncoats. And it's a good thing right now. I've been railing against Manchin all of these years, and I've been railing against why Democrats won't go into these larger Republican areas and even run a liberal, because it's just as simple and plain as this. We have been infiltrated, and these people have bought off. But at least right now, while the American people's eyes are open, we should set up we should start, attacking Manchin and Sinema relentlessly and set it up till it's their time to for re-election.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday from West Virginia, or maybe it was a caller. I had both conversations. In any case, who was telling me that there's billboards all over West Virginia right now saying, Joe, don't forget to protect the filibuster. But Charles, you're familiar with the concept of the Overton window?
No, sir.
The Overton window is the window within which public dialogue about political or economic issues is considered acceptable. In other words, what the mainstream media in America says, okay, we can debate these things. Anything outside the Overton window is considered too far left or too far right. It's never going to happen, and we're not even going to talk about it. And what's happened in the last decade, in particular, and I think that the main things that drove this were the Bernie Sanders primary in 2016, the Bernie Sanders primary in 2020, and the Donald Trump candidacy in 2016. Because in all three of those races, you had a candidate who was openly saying, we have to tax the rich, we have to get money out of politics, we have to drain the swamp, we have to, bring our jobs back from overseas, we have to have, things like this. That Overton window has shifted substantially to the left in the direction of progressive values and progressive legislation, to the point now that the President of the United States, a Democratic president, for the first time since Jimmy Carter, you've got a Democratic president talking about basically what was always considered way outside the Overton window, the Bernie Sanders agenda, the progressive agenda, the Lyndon Johnson agenda, the Franklin Roosevelt agenda from 1980 right up until about, 5, 6, 7 years ago. The media just would not take seriously anything that would have been LBJ-esque or FDR-like, and which is basically what Bernie has been talking about all this time. And so the Overton window has now shifted to the left, but you've got a bunch of politicians who were put into office when the Overton window was to the right. And when being bought off by billionaires and by industry groups was not just acceptable, it was absolutely the norm. And so I think that what you're going to see, if we maintain our republic, and this is the big if, if we, because in 4 or 5 years, hopefully we'll still be able to vote for politicians, and hopefully we'll still have a free press. If that's the case, what I expect is going to continue to happen, Charles, and we've been seeing this particularly in the last 3 or 4 congressional, every 2-year congressional elections, with progressives getting elected in huge numbers simply by saying, I'm not taking corporate money, and suddenly they're right at the top of the pile, is that these politicians like Manchin and Sinema are going to get flushed out of the system and replaced by genuine progressive Democrats. And if the Republicans continue to hold to, neo-fascism, I think they're going to go down the tubes. At least I'm hopeful of that. Any of that makes sense, Charles?
Yeah, from your lips to God's ears. But I'm going to tell you right now, what you were describing as the 1% media, that basically it's like this. If it goes over the air, then the people believe it. And we're not doing, of course, moderate Republicans are destroying us from within. And unless we come to the simple fact that Joe Biden better make some deals with some Republicans that he knows that would probably...
Yeah, he's got to be talking to Lisa Murkowski right now. I'm with you, Charles, because I don't think Kyrsten Sinema is going to go along with anything. I don't think that she plans on running for re-election in 2024. I don't think she cares. She hasn't held a town hall since 2018. I mean, this is how bad it is. Charles, thank you for the call. We'll be back. It's 18 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
What do you do with a politician who simply refuses to meet with her constituents, won't talk to anybody, never holds town hall meetings? You eventually vote them out, but it takes a while. And welcome back. Ronnie in New Berlin, Wisconsin. Hey, Ronnie, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Going back to, I think it was Wednesday, there was a caller that had suggested the idea that postal workers be kind of registered or certified to do registrations and whatnot, like
Correct.
While out on the route, because we have contact with everybody. And
are you a postal worker, Ronnie?
Yeah,
okay,
I am.
Cool. Thank you.
And I'm out on the street, letter carrier.
Mm-hmm.
And, sounds like a great idea because literally we have contact with literally every household in America every day. Unfortunately, it would be a blatant violation of the Hatch Act because federal employees cannot participate in political work while on the clock. Even if we're off the clock and we're in uniform, we can't do it.
But isn't there a difference, Ronnie, between political work, which would be, knocking on somebody's door and saying, are you registered to vote so that you can vote for a Democrat? And versus simply encouraging people to participate in their democracy. Are you registered to vote? Period. Here. I don't care what your party is.
Yeah, you could argue that.
Has this ever been litigated? I mean, I honestly don't know.
Well, we used to be able to have, because letter carriers also have a PAC, because that's how legislators hear our voices.
Sure.
So we used to be able to have people be not carrying their routes and working for campaigns. Somebody who had to do overtime because of that and didn't want to do overtime filed a complaint. And so nationally, there's no longer any active carrier that can work for a campaign, even though they're getting paid by the PAC. And it used to be legal. And
is this a Louis DeJoy dictum or something that came out of a court?
No, this was actually before that. It was, I don't know if it's the Department of Labor or the Elections Commission. I don't know exactly who litigated it, but they just said, nope, illegal. So there's no way that we would even try to pursue that because, I mean, can you imagine losing half of your workforce or all of your workforce?
Yeah.
And also I know that management, the post office itself, would not want to give us time to do those kind of things. They just want us to be delivering mail, and that's that.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
On a quick related note,
sure.
We had our first in-person training for our state of Wisconsin, which was so great to finally see my brothers and sisters other than on Zoom. And we had speakers there, and Republican Glenn Grothman from the state of Wisconsin actually showed up. And speaking of gerrymandering, he actually said this, some politicians just don't want to have town halls. They don't feel the need to meet their constituents. And I thought, well, you just explained gerrymandering.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's true.
It was blatant.
Yeah, remarkable. Ronnie, thanks. Thanks for sharing that information with me. I didn't know about the Postal Service and the Hatch Act and all of it. Thank you, Ronnie. And it's great to hear from you. It's 22 minutes past the hour. Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Empty Shelves Joe, I'll tell you about that right after the break, and then continue picking up your phone calls. Stick around. So we have a new video op-ed over at thomhartmann.com. So have you ever heard of molnupiravir? It's a new drug that actually looks like it reduces the probability that you will end up hospitalized or dead from COVID-19. It's a 5-day course. You take a pill every day for 5 days. It costs Merck, the company that is selling it, $17.74 to make that 5-day, 5 pills. And they are selling it to you and me, to the federal government, for $712 per 5 pills, per, treatment course. And you say, what? And here's where it gets really interesting. The Defense Threat Reduction Agency, which is part of the Department of Defense, provided $10 million of funding to Emory University to develop this drug, and $19 million in additional grants came from the National Institutes of Health. We paid to develop this drug, and now we're going to pay $700 for it? Really? Check it out. There's a video over at thomhartmann.com all about it. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. So there's a trending hashtag on Twitter, Empty Shelves Joe. Now, Louise does most of the shopping in our family, and has been visiting quite a few stores recently because we're just kind of getting back to normal here. And she keeps coming home and saying, wow, the store is like, emptying. There's holes, of product. And now people, and she's been saying this for like a couple of months now, or a month anyway. And so now we're noticing that these complex global supply chains are starting to break down. And conservatives are labeling Biden the Grinch who stole Christmas. By the way, do your Christmas shopping now. Just a word of advice. We're doing that ourselves. Do your Christmas shopping right now. Here's what's happening. There's two things that are colliding, and I think it's really important to understand this. To have a rational understanding of this rather than just this, bumper sticker. Oh yeah, empty shelves joke kind of stuff. That the Republicans are doing. One is that this whole just-in-time manufacturing thing that came out of Japan back in the 80s has become a worldwide fad, essentially, which is don't store stuff in warehouses. That's expensive. The raw material, the things that you need to make your product. If you're building a car, you don't want to have a warehouse full of tires and a warehouse full of car radios and a warehouse full of steering wheels. Instead, you tell the people who manufacture those things to ship them to you as you need them. And so your profit goes up, you become more efficient, but you're also vulnerable to any kind of disruption in that supply chain. But typically, you don't have supply chain disruptions. Well, you combine that with this, real situation that happened with COVID back in, starting in 2020, where the demand just dropped off the edge of the earth. The whole world went into a recession. And as a consequence, we had, the better part of a year where things were not being shipped. There was also disruption in the shipping chains because truckers and longshoremen and sailors, people working on the merchant ships, were all getting COVID and being disabled, and it shut down shipping. So we have a lack of supply that now we're back, on, and it's like, bring it on. But there's these shortages. This is just like what happened after World War II. The exact same thing happened in 1947, 46, 47, and 48. We will work through this, and it's not Joe Biden's fault, but heads up.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And heads up that it's going to get political, sadly. Everything gets political, right? Everything. We'll be right back with your calls. Right there.
And welcome to the Thom Hartmann Book Club, Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America by Michael Eric Dyson, who was a guest on our program a while back. This is from page 86. One of the great privileges of whiteness is not to see color, not to see race, and not to pay a price for ignoring it, except, of course, when you're called on it. But even then, the price pales quite literally in comparison to the high price black folk pay for being black. We pay a price too for not even being able to derive recognition and financial reward for the styles that make the world want to be black so bad that they don't mind looking like us as long as they never ever have to be us. If the appropriators can freely rip off our culture with no consequences, those who revise racial history, the fourth stage of white racial grief, are even less accountable for their deeds. The way of the racial revisionist when it comes to black life and history is simply to rewrite it. Their motto is, it didn't happen that way. There's a flood of writing that tells us that the Civil War wasn't really about slavery, but about an effort to defend states' rights. But, my friend, you've got to put yourself in our place and see the absurdity of such a claim. Defend the rights of states to do what? To enslave blacks. But even here, the irresistible logic of whiteness, that is irresistible to whites themselves, and to all of us who are subjected to white whim, springs into full action. White American history is so powerful that even when it loses, it wins, at least in skirmishes within whiteness itself. From the right wing, there is the belief that the Civil War was fought over the ability of individual states to beat back a federal government out to impose its will. From the left wing, there's the belief that the Civil War was a conflict between the planter class and the proletariat. In each case, race as the main reason for the war is skillfully rewritten, or really written out. Slavery is rewritten too. Some white Christian apologists contend that black folk needed slavery to save their souls or to rescue their cultures. A contemporary twist on this argument radiates in thinkers like Dinesh D'Souza, who claims that American blacks brought here through slavery are now doing far better than their African kin. Some white critics argue that since blacks sold other blacks into slavery, bondage was a black man's problem, not a white man's burden. But revisionists would much rather describe the dehumanization of black folk as little more than a commercial transaction. It's another way of washing their hands of racial responsibility. The effort to rewrite history surfaces in how Malcolm X is treated in the mainstream. It hardly seems likely that the culture he fought with all his heart could be depended on to grasp his true meaning. Malcolm is often read as an apostle of violence, as a frightful figure consumed by destructive rage. But the truth is far more complex, and Malcolm was far more complicated. But isn't the autobiography of Malcolm X so enduringly appealing because it shows Malcolm giving up hatred as a means to racial justice? Now, Malcolm X believed in the liberation of black folk from the mental and psychological chains of white supremacy. He was not committed to nonviolence as a way of life or as a method of social strategy. He believed that such a commitment prevents the full realization of black emancipation. Yet he was not personally violent. As Ossie Davis says in his eulogy, responding to the claim that Malcolm preached hate and was a fanatic and a racist, quote, "Did you even talk to Brother Malcolm? Was he ever himself associated with violence or any public disturbance?" End quote. The rage that flowed in Malcolm's veins was the rage against a force of whiteness that aimed to wash its black kin from the face of the earth. The urge to rewrite black history occasionally gives way to the final stage of white racial grief, which is simply, when it comes to race, dilute it. That is, to argue that black stuff doesn't just plague black folk. To summarize, bad stuff happens to everyone. This argument surfaced in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and that storm certainly hit black folk, but it hit white folk too. This is the sordid version of reverse American exceptionalism. It is the same Me Too impulse that flares in the bitter battle against affirmative action. Beloved, I can't help but notice that affirmative action is the bee in so many of your bonnets. You look around in your classrooms and you think every black person is there because they got an unfair shake from the system. You look at your job and you think that your black coworker got an unjust nod of approval from the powers that be. You never stop to think how the history of whiteness in America is one long scroll of affirmative action. You never stop to think that Babe Ruth never had to play the greatest players of his generation, just the greatest white players. You never stop to think that most of our presidents never rose to the top because they bested the competition, only just the white competition. White privilege is a self-selecting tool that keeps you from having to compete with the best. The history of white folk gaining access to Harvard, Princeton, or Yale is the history of white folk deciding ahead of the game that you are superior. You argue that slots in school should be reserved for your kin because, after all, they are smarter, more disciplined, better suited, and more deserving than inferior blacks. That's like concluding that the Cleveland Cavaliers can't possibly win the NBA championship because they're down 3-1 to the Golden State Warriors. Throw in the towel and call it a series. But they must play the series to determine the winner. Whiteness is having all the advantages on your side. The referee's blowing the whistle for you. The arena packed with only your fans. In fact, whiteness means you never even have to play the game at all, at least not in head-to-head matchups with the talent and skill of black folks. Here's We Cannot Stop by Michael Eric Dyson.
And it's very, very straightforward. It says, if 2 or more persons in any state or territory or in any place subject to the jurisdiction of the United States conspire to overthrow, put down, or destroy by force the government of the United States, or to levy war against them, or to oppose by force the authority thereof, or by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States, or by force to seize, take, or possess any property of the United States, they shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for not more than 20 years or both. Tell me that doesn't perfectly describe what happened on January 6th. Seditious conspiracy. The video's at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. And AJ in Eureka, California. Hey, AJ, what's on your mind today?
A lot of stuff, especially since this is Anything Goes Friday. I guess the door's wide open, but
please pick one
right now. I am. How to win over Republican Senate votes for a Build Back Better plan.
Okay.
And
all
my
ears.
theory, okay, well, it's probably some of the work that you're doing, but I'm trying to figure a way to make it all work together. As more majority of likely voters are reminded, and their representatives are, of Nader's point in Unstoppable, which you seem to be doing a pretty good job of, and they start to see the events leading up to January 6th as a sequel to the wilding in Stanley Kubrick's Clockwork Orange, the reps will probably see the logic of supporting some form of a Build Back Better plan, because there's a lot of stuff that people on both sides of the aisle support, like dental care and stuff like that.
I think that's the bet that Joe Biden is making. I mean, he's going on the road today. He's pitching this thing, and he's not just pitching it to Democrats or Democratic areas. And this is what he has to do. I mean, you know, if he's going to have a chance of putting enough pressure on Manchin and Sinema to go along with this program, he's going to have to mobilize public opinion.
Right. So if he can get them to shift away, and as the events are unfolding in the review of January 6th, more people are realizing that Clockwork Orange movie, if you saw that, is exactly the sequel to it. It was probably inspired a lot of the stuff on the backstory to what's going on right now.
You're talking about where they were kicking people and beating them up.
Yeah, the wilding,
singing
the
in the
whole
rain.
idea of Wild Orange getting away with it at the end because he's just too big to fail or whatever. He got away with it, and that's Kubrick's ultimate warning there. Yeah. And I think that the Senate is getting that point. Okay, so here's the deal. The offer they can't refuse. Split the baby. This time, the wisdom of Solomon makes sense. To split the baby right in half, the part 2 of the Build Back Better. 3.5 in half is 175. That's a number that Manchin can come up to because he's pretty close to it already. He knows he's going to have to increase his number, and then the other sides will drop theirs. Okay, make it a 5-year plan with half the money, and have each year the executive summary as part of the State of the Union address by the president or whoever's in office at that time to do a progress report on the success or failure of that plan as it's being implemented.
Right.
Only for 5 years, though.
No, this is what the Progressive Caucus, this is one of the things that they proposed, and Manchin and Sinema have both said no, we're not going to go along with that. And Sinema has now said that she will not go along with any tax increases on corporations or rich people, which is how 100% of this large bill is paid for.
Yeah, then the formula is to go back to step 1 and remind them all of what Nader's point was in Unstoppable. The votes are really there to support the Biden plan. It's not just his plan, and it's not Bernie Sanders' plan. It's a really objective understanding of the problems that we're dealing with now.
I agree.
If you just pick one of those things, for example, of tooth care, health, dental, how many people are getting other diseases because their teeth are going bad and they don't have the money to fix them?
Oh, there even appears to be a connection between dental disease, I guess is what it's called, and dementia. I mean, which is pretty amazing. Yeah, AJ, I think you're onto something. And we'll see. I mean, as I said, Joe Biden is on the road right now. He's trying to sell this thing. So, hopefully he'll have some success with that. Thanks a lot for the call, AJ. Bill in Richmond, Virginia. Bill, you're on the air. What's up?
Hey, Tom. Hey, good afternoon. Like I said, excuse me. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, in a title of the article Davis in the Washington Post, was an op-ed, is that first thing is this, is that, let me bring up one point. This thing about comparing President Biden to LBJ or FDR, or for that matter, Reagan, is that really a valid comparison?
Well, if he succeeds in passing these things, he will have been as transformational a president as those three. So, yeah, I think so.
Yes.
But if he doesn't succeed, then he will have become Jimmy Carter.
Oh, okay, but here's the point I'm trying to make, is this, is that you said earlier that all these progressives that have been are winning offices. Well, in the last election in 2020, I'll look at what happened in the House. I mean, you can't blame all that on gerrymandering or the amount of Democrats that lost their seats.
Yeah.
And in Virginia, and this is what I bring to Virginia, which is about as blue a southern state as you're ever going to find. You don't have to worry about Texas. But right now, our governor's race, in fact, it's not all three statewide races, all running are within a statistical tie.
Right.
And the Post pointed out as to who it was the vote was for the shifts coming from. It's coming from independents. It's coming from Republicans who voted for President Biden because they didn't like Trump.
Right.
So I know Trump's in the background there, but my point is, does the American populace really sanction all this change?
You're talking about Biden's proposed changes. If you look at opinion polling on each one of the things contained in that legislation, in the Build Back Better legislation, every single one of them is polling well north of 70%. Some are polling as high as 90%, like letting Medicare negotiate drug prices. But the problem is, Bill, that the media has not been talking about what's in the bill. The media has been talking about what the price tag is.
Oh, no. That's one thing the Post had an article about the other day. They went through and broke in things that are in the bill.
Right, but that's the rare exception that proves the rule. The vast majority of the coverage has been on, is it going to be $3.5 trillion, or is it going to be $2.6 trillion, or is it going to be $1.5 trillion, rather than is it going to be child care and cleaning up the environment and giving seniors dental and vision, or is it, or are we, which one of these things are we going to cut? The discussion has been completely skewed by the American media, and which I think is tragic. We're not talking, and we never talk about issues. The media hates talking about issues because issues make it seem like they're taking a partisan position, and the media doesn't want to be perceived as partisan. So instead of talking about the issues, they talk about the horse race, which they think makes them nonpartisan. And frankly, by talking about the horse race, they're playing into the hands of the people who don't want you to know what the issues are, which is the Republicans.
Well, there's another article. I'm sure you read the Daily Beast. There's a long column in there. It was by a writer, and he went through the same thing, too, going back to cost. Because one of the things that's skewed on the polls, and I've been getting polling on it, is that they can ask you a question, are you in favor of this? But the kicker comes, are you in favor of this if you have to pay more for it? Well, the Daily Beast article talked about the fact that CBO says you cannot finance all of this on this tax on the wealthy. If you took everything the wealthy had, every nickel they had, it would pay for 8 months worth of government under these programs.
The CBO never said that, Bill. And it's just simply not true. I mean, we're talking about $300 billion a year over 10 years, $350 billion a year over 10 years. $350 billion is chump change. That, for 1 year, Donald Trump's tax cut was $1.5 trillion in a 2-year period. George W. Bush's tax cut was about the same. Ronald Reagan's tax cut in today's dollars would be about $3.5 trillion. We're not even talking about reversing Trump's tax cut. The proposed increases on people making over $400,000 a year and profitable corporations does not even entirely reverse Donald Trump's tax cut, and it still pays for this legislation.
Okay. Well, like I said, I hope that's true because
it is.
Trump's tax hurt me individually. Believe me, it did. And that's one of the reasons I've been disliking Donald Trump before that happened.
Well, if you're super rich, Trump's tax cuts were very, very useful. If you're not, then not so much. But the problem, I think, Bill, is what I think we've been identifying in this conversation is that most people don't know what's in this legislation and don't know what the arguments are, and I think it's very unfortunate. But our media is letting us down. Bill, thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for listening to us on SiriusXM. We'll be right back. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Back with your calls in just a moment.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. Thank you for joining us. Back with your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Patrick, watch us on Facebook Live in East Lansing, Michigan. Hey, Patrick, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I really love your show, and I learn a lot from it. And the thing I like the most about it is when there's anything that you've reported that is either incorrect or incomplete, you've corrected it. And I trust what's on your show, and I read the articles you post. So that's why I'm calling today. I'm calling because Greg Palast on September 30th, 2021, just two weeks ago, was on your show on a Friday, and he was outside the federal courthouse speaking about the 6-month sentence given to the plaintiff's lawyer, Steven Donziger, the Harvard Law grad,
right,
Obama's classmate, who got the 30,000 farmers in Ecuador this $9 billion recovery for their terrible harm that was done to them over decades.
Right.
And he got on your show, I don't know if you recall this, but he said that this sentence was without precedent, that no lawyer had been put in prison for refusing to obey a court order. He said it was a technical dispute. He said he was denied a jury trial by a biased judge with a private prosecutor who had worked for the corporation that was going after Donziger for Chevron, and that no attorney in America had ever been sent to prison for violating a court order, and his crime was representing the Ecuadorian
Well, lots of lawyers
farmers.
have been sent to jail for violating court orders. I don't know.
And I represented at least a dozen.
Yeah, I don't know if Greg was engaging in hyperbole
and
or
then
if he
he
was trying to
said,
be
this
very,
is the
very
longest
specific.
ever, and I worked at the Third Circuit. Chadwick was in jail for 11 years because he stole millions, and he wouldn't tell the court where it was.
Yeah.
And so the reason for my call is that this really misses the story, and no reporter who you should have on your show would tell this story falsely without saying what Steven Donziger did. Because what Steven Donziger did was found to be true when he was disbarred by the New York Court of Appeals, which Greg Palast never mentions. And most importantly, it was the basis for the criminal conspiracy finding. The federal judge in the full Second Circuit said
He refused to turn over his laptop.
That's not what he did. In fact, he didn't refuse to turn over his laptop. He waived the right to treat as privilege what was on it by not turning over a privilege log. That was a lie, too. And you waive your right to appeal when you don't turn over a privilege log. And why was he doing that? He was hiding evidence of his own criminal conspiracy and not withdrawing and betraying his clients. Now, I've handled RICO cases. I handled one in the federal court in Detroit. It was upheld in the Sixth Circuit against a disbarred lawyer who was phoning up bids. And this isn't unusual. When the tobacco case came forward, Dickie Scruggs was bribing judges just like Steven Donziger was found to have done by the judge who was involved in the bribery, who testified, Guerra, that
Patrick,
Donziger
your
wrote
knowledge
the
of this
opinion.
wildly exceeds my own. Did you hear Michael Moore's interview with Donziger? Michael Moore pushed this out on his Substack newsletter yesterday, I think.
So I have not heard that one. I know Michael Moore. I've known him since a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to Donziger on Ralph Nader's show, and I wrote Ralph Nader exactly what I wrote to you.
Mm-hmm.
And what I wrote to both were that it's not acceptable to fail to ask about the crimes that Donziger admitted on tape. And you can listen to him admitting that he's going to bribe the judge and write the expert testimony. And if the judge thinks he's going to get killed, that's good for us. And these are the facts that got him disbarred. It's not a technical dispute. It's a corruption, and that's why these farmers lost their judgment.
I get it. Patrick, thank you for correcting the record, assuming that you are. Thank you. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. And welcome back. 49 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you. Kenyatta in Los Angeles. Hey, Kenyatta, what's on your mind today?
Well, yesterday you had a program in which you discussed the ever and more increasingly present black flags.
Yeah, and I wrote about it in my daily rant today as well. At some length.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. I haven't opened my mailbox yet, but I will check it out, Tom. But I did want to point out to you that there's a variation on that black flag, and I don't know if you're aware of it. Okay. And it has a blue line in it.
Right.
And that represents the connection between white supremacy and the police. And you'll notice that when Donald Trump holds his rallies, he always talks about how we love our police. Mm-hmm. What I'm trying to say to you is something that you and I have talked about for years. There is no question, particularly between an anti-black racism, what I call blackism, and white supremacy and the police. There just isn't. And this imagery, Tom, yesterday on your program, there was someone who called and actually openly talked about civil war in a civilized way. I mean, I think it's on everyone's mind, whether you want it to be or not. Yeah. But being a black man in the United States, I just wanted to give you what may be to you and your listeners a strange point of view. This stuff is very concerning to men like me. The George Floyd or the Police Reform Act was killed, although a year ago the country was on fire with this stuff. All of a sudden that has gone away. We've got black flags being flown, which are direct signals because we always get we're always the first of the worst. So if there is to be openly violent conflict in this country, we know who is going to come down on the most. And there are a great deal of black men like myself who are very concerned about this, Tom. And I know that everybody else wants to talk about everything else. But for us, this is existential. And along with all of that, we've got people from Haiti who they're not dreamers all of a sudden. They get whipped with the stirrups from horses. So, along with all of that, let me just say that we have the Ahmaud Arbery trial beginning on Monday, and Rittenhouse coming up soon. Mm-hmm. So, let me tell you something, United States of America, your problem, that is your deepest problem, is still your deepest problem.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And the black flag was flown over multiple massacres of black people during and immediately after the Civil War, including Olustee, Fort Pillow, Poison Spring, and the Crater. There's a book about this. It's called Black Flag Over Dixie, Racial Atrocities and Reprisals in the Civil War by Gregory Irwin. And he writes, when the Union's black defenders responded in kind, in other words, jumped into the battle, the Civil War descended to a level of inhumanity that most Americans prefer to forget.
That's right.
Slaughters of African Americans became the norm for Confederate soldiers, often under the banner of a black flag. And here we are. And now they're flying all over the country. And Amazon is selling them. I mean, the ones that I linked to in my article are on Amazon. Made in China, by the way.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. In fact, it says Amazon recommended. So you can check it out. It's incredible. Kenyatta, thank you. Thank you. It's nice to hear from you. Norm in Tampa, Florida. Hey, Norm, what's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm alive and kicking, Norm.
Oh, I hear that. That's great. That's great. Well, I want to just kind of somewhat piggyback. I'm a black man here in the United States, and I'm also a pharmacist and a dentist. And what I want to just preface by saying this: on October 20th, this month, next week, there's a large mark of American pain and disability that's coming in about people protesting that they're not being able to get proper treatment for their pain, and that is a direct result of insurance companies who have jumped into bed with the corruption in the Department of Justice that don't want to pay physicians for their services. And so what they do is they call in to the Department of Justice, DEA, and say, hey, these guys are committing health care fraud. And we have a very interesting case in California where we have a doctor named Dr. Villasini Ganesh, and she's married to a black doctor, a black guy named Greg Belcher. They have 3 small children, and they didn't want to pay Dr. Ganesh. So what did they do? They indicted her and indicted her husband, and when they couldn't find anything, they brought in these false records and stuff. And Dr. Belcher, who is a Navy veteran, a captain in the Navy, orthopedic surgeon, he was convicted on $217 invoice for putting the wrong date on it.
Whoa!
And she's faced, you can read about this.
And this is all predicated on the assumption that the doctors are prescribing too many narcotics or pharmacies are dispensing too many. They're using that as the excuse, basically, for all this stuff?
Absolutely, and they've gotten away with it. Yeah. And so
we've got a national hysteria about opioids going on right now as a result of what the Sackler family inflicted on us.
Right. Again, there's a lot that's into that people don't that talk about that the government's been able to just simply just get away with. Because listen, we're arresting doctors at a record rate here in this country, and the problem is that over the past, what they did was they lowered the metrics. And so they start picking up all these doctors around almost like 4,700. Most African Americans amount to like 480. So if you're of color, you're getting arrested. The problem is despite all of this stuff about opioid crisis, there has been less opioid prescriptions being written and more deaths caused by drug overdose.
Yeah.
So it's not the doctors or the prescriptions. It is heroin. It is fentanyl that has been brought in this country. And in fact, if you read the CIGAR's report, you'll see that the heroin that's brought in this country is controlled by who? The Drug Enforcement Agency. They're the ones who paid off the warlords and wasted $8.3 billion of our money. Nobody knows what happened.
You're talking about in Afghanistan.
And then just read John Stopko's report. And he tells, and it's in our blog called YouAreWithinTheNorms.com, and it goes over in detail. But the problem, what is happening now is people, chronic diseases like sickle cell and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome are being made criminalized. And that's what we have here.
I get it, Norm. I get it. Thank you very much. Thanks for sharing your experience as a pharmacist and as a dentist. And it's got to be a tough one. It's got to be a real tough one. There's so many areas where we're just being whipped around by corruption. It's bizarre. We'll be back with Anything Goes Friday right after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery, CBD for sleep and pain relief. More info is available at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Ground News, a well-rounded perspective for news readers. More info at ground.news/Tom. Angie, for any project on your to-do list. More info at Angie.com. Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at Dinovite.com. And ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Richard Wolff's Understanding Socialism. This is from the introduction. Socialism is a kind of yearning for a better life than what capitalism permits for most people. Socialist yearnings are as old as capitalism itself because they are its products. Where and when capitalism's problems and failings have accumulated criticism and critics, socialist voices have arisen. And so it is again now. Any serious discussion of socialism must begin by acknowledging socialism's rich diversity. Whatever particular aspect of socialism we choose to analyze, they need to be located within socialism's complexity. That avoids presenting one's own interpretation as if it were the entirety of socialism. In this book, I focus on the economic aspects of socialism, how it differs from capitalism in broad outlines. I'm more interested in socialist critiques of capitalism and their implications about socialist alternatives than in the particulars of the few early experiments in erecting socialist systems, USSR, People's Republic of China, and so on, that history so far offers. Finally, my own education and work constrain me to concentrate on Western Europe and North America. Some important aspects of socialism are thus not covered or discussed here. Yearnings for better lives, such as socialism proposes, are not new. In slave societies, the slaves hoped and dreamed of lives less hard and less out of their own control. Their yearning aimed to obtain freedom. They sought social change that would preclude any one person being the property of another. In feudal societies, the serfs, free in the sense that no one owned them, yearned for better lives too. Their subordination to lords included heavy labor and other burdens that they wanted lifted. They hoped and dreamed of a society in which they would not be bound to the land, the lord of that land, and the feudal dues of labor and subservience. The serfs mobilized in the 1789 French Revolution to demand liberty, equality, and brotherhood. In effect, the serfs had expanded on what the slaves had called freedom. In the American Revolution against British King George III, the revolutionaries were neither slaves nor serfs. They were mostly self-employed farmers, craftspeople, and merchants subject to a foreign feudal kingdom. They wanted liberty as individuals to pursue their dreams without hindrance from feudalism or monarchism, whether foreign or domestic. They added democracy to the goals advanced by the slaves and serfs before them. The different systems of slavery, feudalism, and small-scale self-employment produced masses of people yearning for better lives. Eventually, each of those systems provoked revolutions. Many people then sought to break away from and go beyond those systems. The French and American revolutions marked key moments in the social transformations of major pre-capitalist systems into capitalist ones. By capitalist system, we mean that particular organization of production in which the basic human relation is employer-employee instead of master-slave, lord-serf, or individual self-employment. The revolutionaries who wanted and built capitalism hoped and believed the transition to employer-employee relations of production would bring with them the liberty, equality, brotherhood, and democracy they had yearned for. The revolution's leaders promised to themselves and to the people they led that those goals would be achieved. But the transition to capitalist employer-employee relations that increasingly replaced the previous slave, feudal, and self-employment relations of production had unintended consequences. Capitalism soon proved to be different from what its revolutionaries had hoped. While it enabled some people to be more free and more independent than slaves, serf, or self-employed subjects of monarchies had been, it also seriously limited freedom, independence, and democracy for many. Capitalism betrayed many of the promises made by its advocates. It produced and reproduced great inequalities of income and wealth. Poverty proved to be as endemic as capitalism seemed equally adept at producing and reproducing both wealth and poverty. The capitalist rich used their wealth to shape and control politics and culture. Democratic forms hid very undemocratic content. The cyclical instability attending capitalism constantly threatened and hurt large numbers of people, and so on. Growing numbers of employees within capitalism began to yearn for better lives. They defined those yearnings first in the familiar terms of the earlier French and American revolutions: equality, fraternity, liberty, and democracy. They criticized a capitalism that failed to deliver those to most people and demanded social changes to achieve them. Many people still continue to want a better, softer, friendlier capitalism, where government regulates and intervenes to achieve more of what the French and American revolutionaries had yearned for and promised. They are also often self-defined as socialists. However, capitalism's development provoked another, different perspective that also called itself socialism. In that view, capitalism had not broken from slavery, feudalism, and monarchy nearly as much as its advocates had imagined. Slavery had masters' slaves, feudalism had lords' serfs, and monarchy had kings' subjects as their key sources of their inequalities, lack of freedom, oppressions, and conflicts. The employer-employee relation of production and capitalism generated parallel problems. Capitalism installed monarchies inside individual workplaces, even as monarchies outside workplaces were rejected. Kings mostly disappeared, but inside workplaces, the owners or their designated boards of directors assumed king-like powers. The book Understanding Socialism by Richard Wolff.
Of Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. I'll pick up your calls in just a moment. A couple of news stories I wanted to share with you. The first is Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema apparently are now starting to come out and say exactly what their positions are on President Biden's $350 billion a year for 10-year Build Back Better proposal. They are saying that, number one, Kyrsten Sinema is saying, if you don't pass in the House of Representatives this $1.2 trillion, well, it's only $500 billion of new money, this relatively small and modest and doesn't fix climate change at all and doesn't help people on Medicare with drug prices. If you don't vote on that in the House so that we can just like pass that and dust our hands off and say, okay, infrastructure's done, let's just stop talking about this. If you don't do that, I'm not going to vote, at all for your $3.5 trillion bill. Ain't going to happen. So number one, she's taking that position. Number two, as the president and every other Democrat in the Senate is saying, well, if you won't take $3.5 trillion, which we're in favor of, how about 3? Nope. How about 2.9? Nope. How about 2.7? Nope. How about 2.2? No. How about 1.9 trillion? Both of them are saying we will not guarantee that we could get behind that, even $1.9 trillion. Number two. Number three, Joe Manchin raised concerns over the proposed expansion of Medicare to include vision, dental, and hearing coverage. While Medicare Advantage plans are competing with Medicare on this basis, you think maybe somebody in the industry is, well, let's not even go there. Anyhow, he also made clear that he opposes new paid family and medical leave provisions. Is this guy like, mainlining Charles Koch? I mean, because it's like all libertarian all the time. And then, worst of all, Manchin says that he won't go along with climate change proposals in the bill. He said the goal laid out by the White House to cut greenhouse emissions by half in that time frame simply will not happen. In fact, he added, we are in the middle of an energy crisis. So from Joe Manchin's point of view, the big crisis in America right now is not that global warming is jacking our storms and causing literally trillions of dollars worth of damage every year. No, that's not the problem. The problem is that there's not enough fossil fuels. We have an energy shortage. And then we get to the last one from Kyrsten Sinema. A major holdup in the talks is Sinema's opposition to any tax increases for individuals and large corporations, per two Senate Democratic aides familiar with the matter. Her position threatens to deprive the package of over $700 billion in revenue to finance the bulk of President Joe Biden's agenda. When this is from Business Insider, and when Business Insider reached out to her office, they note her office did not immediately respond to her request for comment. Biden expressed frustration. He says, I was able to close the deal with 99% of my parties. 2 people. He holds up 2 fingers. 2 people. And we know, of course, who those two people are. Topic one. Topic two, the other thing that I wanted to share with you is this absolutely extraordinary story. Brittany Poolaw. This seems to happen so far almost exclusively to black women. I've got several examples here. Every single one of them is an African-American woman. She was 17 weeks pregnant, which is pretty substantial. It's moving along in the pregnancy. And she had a miscarriage. She shows up at the hospital. They help her through the miscarriage. They do a what's it called? Autopsy on the what would you call this? The fetus, the baby, whatever, on the dead child that came out of her. And what they found was that it had a congenital abnormality. This is why she miscarried. It had what's called placental abruption. Now, I'm not a physician, but I think that kind of explains itself. Something wrong with the placenta, being attached to the wall of the uterus, and it also had chorioamnionitis. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, but that sounds to me like it has something to do with the amniotic fluid that surrounds the baby. But basically, obviously, this baby miscarried because it had these congenital malformation abnormalities. But here's the thing. During her pregnancy, Brittany Poolaw had taken some drugs. And when they drew blood from this miscarried child, what they found was methamphetamine. Not toxic levels, not enough to cause an abortion, not enough to cause a miscarriage, but they prosecuted her under this law for losing her baby, and she's looking at serious prison time. I mean, 20-year-old Brittany Poolaw was sentenced last week to 4 years in prison after being convicted of first-degree manslaughter. Manslaughter. Yes, using drugs when you're pregnant is stupid, wrong, and against the law, but that's not what caused this miscarriage. And everybody's clear on that. But these laws are drawn in such a way that, it's like the old drug laws. Like, you can use them against people that you just, as John Ehrlichman told a reporter back 20 years ago, we used the drug laws in the Nixon administration specifically to target the African-American civil rights community and the hippies who were anti-war. He said, you can't make it illegal to be black or to be a hippie, or against the war, but we could use these drug laws to disrupt their communities. That was his phrase. And Poolaw is just the most recent woman to face prosecution over pregnancy loss. Another black woman, Chelsea Cheyenne Becker, faced first-degree murder charges following a stillbirth. Now, in that case, there was sort of a happy ending, and the judge dismissed the case. But can you imagine losing a child and then being accused of murder? And having to hire lawyers and go through all that kind of stuff. And then in 2019, Marsha Jones was charged with manslaughter in Alabama for having a miscarriage after she was shot. What happened was she got into an argument with a neighbor. The neighbor pulled out a gun and shot her in the foot. The shot to the foot apparently provoked her body to go into shock or whatever, and that led to the miscarriage. And so they prosecuted her on the premise that she was the one who started the argument. And because she started the argument led to the other woman pulling out a gun. The woman shoots her in the foot. The foot injury leads to that therefore she should go to prison. They were saying that she violated the state's fetal personhood law. You endangered a person. This is just the beginning. And finally, the last little, this is a crazy alert. This is a full-out crazy alert I got to share with you. The Queen of England, who is, as I recall, 99 years old, has been advised by her physician to give up her evening martini. They're putting pressure on no more drink after dinner. And then a family friend, and this is all ahead of next June. She turns 100, right? The family friend said, the Queen has been told to give up her evening drink, which is usually a martini. It's not really a big deal for her. She's not a big drinker, but it seems a trifle unfair at this stage in her life that she's having to give up one of her very few pleasures. Yeah, I'm with you on that. If you make it to 99, you should be entitled to a martini. 15 minutes past the hour. I will pick up your calls right after this break. We'll be together for the rest of the hour. It's Anything Goes Friday, just you and me all day here. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. Telling the truth to the multinational corporations, especially those who are buying our politicians, we'd really rather you didn't know all about it.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And I see somebody tweeted, it's on my Twitter feed here, after the gold rush in Vanity Fair, where the Trump's lawyer said he was a serial liar like Hitler. And welcome back. Gene in Nanticoke, Pennsylvania. Hey, Gene, what's on your mind today?
Yes, you were talking about that supply shortage with the freighters sitting off port, not being able to get their merchandise to shore. Well, we had a business model, back a good 15 years ago. It was called, it's on the tip of my tongue, just-in-time delivery.
Yeah.
And it never worked. It was just like, it was a
huge fad in the 80s and 90s. You know, it's like, Japanese management. And I think it was attributed to an American. In fact, they wrote books about this guy. I'm forgetting his name, but he went over to Japan. He was a management consultant. And he recommended this. And a couple of Japanese businesses, I think one of the big car manufacturers, started doing just-in-time delivery. Of course, they were getting everything from other Japanese manufacturers. So, you can do that when everything is local. And then American businesses started adopting it.
Well,
wasn't his name Deming? Wasn't it like Deming or Demrick or something like that? There was this management consultant. Maybe I'm mixing up my stories, but because it's been 30 years, or 20 years anyway, maybe 30. But anyway, back to you, Gene.
Yes. Our raw materials that came in for our product came from Canada. And a lot of times their deliveries would be late, which disrupted our supply chain, our delivery chain. Then a lot of times we'd be rushing to get a product prepared, ready for shipping, and it was going to the docks to be loaded, and a phone call would come in from the office, hold that, it's on a credit hold. This customer didn't pay their last bill. It just didn't work. It was like a bunch.
What kind of products were you manufacturing?
Yeah.
What kind of product was this, if you don't mind my asking?
This was no, I don't mind because most of the people I worked with, they're all conservative. They wouldn't recognize my voice or know I was talking to you. This was an aluminum extrusion plant.
Okay.
And we made custom shapes. The customer would oftentimes send their own dies in for the presses, or we would machine the dies for them. And the raw product was aluminum billet. It came in from Canada, and sometimes they'd be late, and it was just like
So did you guys give up on just-in-time and go back to using warehouses, or try to just suffer through it?
Well, now here's the kicker, because they had two divisions. They had a machine shop, and they had the extrusion facility, and they were in two separate buildings. And they combined them into one building, and they sold the small building, which would have been perfect for warehousing. But everybody was pinching the pennies, and like a dog chasing his tail, it was a mess.
Yeah.
It did not work.
And that's what's happening right now around the world. And this is compounded by the fact that the port of Shanghai, and I think people completely forgot this, but remember 4 or 5 months ago, Shanghai is one of the major export ports in China. They shut that port down for like a week because of a COVID outbreak, remember?
Vaguely, yeah. And I remember everyone was going to take one of these sick days and shut the plant down for a day, and the company was completely, just out of their minds.
Yeah, it's amazing. Gene, thanks for sharing your story with us. It's 19 minutes past the hour. Back with your calls in just a minute. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So Rand Paul is now echoing Louis Gohmert. Remember Louis Gohmert back in the day, back in the after 9/11, when he was talking about terror babies? There's Muslims coming to the United States to have babies who will be citizens, and we can't kick them out anymore, and then they're going to grow up and they're going to be terrorists. Yeah, and we all kind of laughed at Louis Gohmert. So now Rand Paul is talking about how the Biden administration is taking kids from down at the border who may have it, COVID, and they're plucking them up and putting them all over the United States as if they're wishing to seed the country with a new variant. Right. But that's not half of it. Then he goes on to say that, for him, quote, the bottom line for those who are saying I won't go to a restaurant unless everybody's vaccinated, he says, mind your own business. Well, Rand, it is our business. Public health is all of our businesses. I've got a whole new rant about Rand Paul's bizarre take on the public good over at ThomHartmann.com. It's a video. You can check it out there. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. And picking up your calls, Carol in Menneson, Pennsylvania. Hey, Carol, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. While I was on hold, I heard your story about Manchin and Sinema, and that's tragic because they are out to destroy Biden's entire agenda, and I think they'll be successful.
Well, the strategy that these giant corporations and right-wing billionaires use is they don't try to buy an entire party. That's a waste of money. They're very strategic. They buy just enough legislators to be able to block things from happening that they don't want. It's just that simple, and that's what they've done here.
Yeah, that isn't why I called, though. I called about the voter suppression. With these Republicans in the legislators that are making these voter suppression laws and are undermining our ability to even have our vote counted, with the Senate saying that they aren't going to vote on any voter suppression laws, and they won't pass I bet they don't pass Manchin's voter law. And if they don't, and it's legal what they're doing in these legislatures, what will happen? Will we be able to stop them from stealing our ability to vote in the future?
Very much like they don't try to buy all the politicians, they just buy enough to bust things up and prevent things from happening. They're doing the same thing very strategically with majority black counties around the United States. Wayne County, which is where Detroit is in Michigan. I believe it's Milwaukee County in Wisconsin. Harris County in Texas, which is where Houston is, or maybe Dallas, one or the other. And Maricopa County in Arizona. This is the one that they audited. And in these counties, they're replacing election officials with Republican operatives who are Trumpy, who are willing to toe the fascist line.
Right.
In answer to your question, Carol, specifically, will they get away with it? Can they pull this off? I don't know. We're going to have to watch. We're going to have to keep an eye on this. There are some significant forces pushing back on them, including a lot of former Republicans. People like Steve Schmidt, Nicole Wallace, and the whole bunch over at the Lincoln Project. And Nicole Wallace on MSNBC, and Joe Scarborough now on MSNBC. These are all Republicans or former Republicans who are pushing back. But the question is, will they succeed? Are these guys going to succeed in basically overturning democracy in the United States? I am very worried. It's why I wrote the op-ed I did today.
I am too. I'm very worried.
Yeah,
because they could get away with this, and if they do, and they put Trump in power, they aren't going to be very happy about it themselves, because he's going to wreck our democracy, he's going to wreck our economy, and they will rue the day they ever heard his name, because he's a madman, And I know it, and most people know it. I knew it back in New York in the 80s.
Yeah.
He was crazy.
Yeah. Well, my concern, Carol, is, none of us want to see Donald Trump back in the White House, but a larger concern is, what if the Republican nominee in 2024, instead of being Donald Trump, is an actual competent Republican?
Yeah, like Tom Cotton.
Yeah, Tom Cotton, Ron DeSantis, Josh Hawley. A competent Republican who is also a neo-fascist and who actually understands what they're doing. Trump is just flailing around for his own self-interest and willing to use whatever comes along his way. We're going to have to stay engaged. That's the only thing I can think of. Carol, thank you for the call. I got to move along here. Rob in Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, Rob, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I just wanted to know your opinion on how things are going with this President Biden. I see a completely failed president, a completely failed economy where inflation will be the name of the game. You want to know why companies aren't bringing in stock? Look at steel companies, for example. There's 13 in the U.S. Only 6 of them are up and running, and the reason why is because they don't know what the future holds. It has a lot more to do with Biden than anything. This guy's a madman. He's wrecking the economy.
Biden is a madman?
He absolutely
Seriously?
is. And if you look at Afghanistan, what a failure. Look at the border, what a failure.
Rob,
he's a complete 100%.
I'm so sorry to hear you say these things. I mean, you realize that it was Donald Trump who set up the withdrawal from Afghanistan and made it so. Okay, Rob, if you're going to try and talk over me, I'll just dump the call. I mean, it's a waste of time. I have only 45 seconds, so I don't want to put somebody on and give them such a little period of time. But let me just say, Joe Biden is no madman. And I just, how do you even respond to this? I find myself almost speechless to say that, a decent guy like Joe Biden, who has had, a lot of tragedy in his life, he's a genuinely empathetic person. I've met him. To say that he's a madman when you've got people on the right who are literally trying to destroy our republic is just breathtaking. To hear poor Rob, I mean, he's obviously been indoctrinated by these shills in right-wing media, and he's echoing these right-wing media talking points. And it's like, I'm not even outraged. I'm sad of the tragedy that Rob has been, frankly, such a sucker.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with your calls right after this. It's 27 and a half minutes past the hour.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Homewreckers by Aaron Glantz, a Pulitzer Prize finalist. The subtitle is How a Gang of Wall Street Kingpins, Hedge Fund Magnates, Crooked Banks, and Venture Capitalists suckered millions out of their homes and demolished the American dream. It's quite a subtitle. This is from chapter 21, titled Triumph of the Homewreckers. Donald Trump took the oath of office on a chilly Friday morning, delivering an inaugural address that promised an end to the corruption and impotence that had widened America's historic wealth gap. He understood that his victory had been propelled by harnessing the public's rage and envy at having been left behind in the economic recovery, and that he promised that he would not forget it. Evoking FDR's famous Forgotten Man speech from 1932 that promised to prioritize the needs of, quote, the man at the bottom of the economic pyramid, Trump declared, quote, the forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. Politicians had prospered, he said, but jobs had evaporated, factories closed. Quote, the establishment protected itself, but not the citizens of our country. Their victories have not been your victories. Their triumphs have not been your triumphs. And while they celebrated in our nation's capital, there was little chance to celebrate for struggling families all across our land. This all changes, starting right here and right now, Trump proclaimed. Because this moment is your moment. It belongs to you. This is your day. This is your celebration. End of quote. The moment, however, belonged not to the great mass of struggling Americans, but to the new president's most ardent supporters, flamboyant businessmen who profited off the pain of the housing bust and were now poised to steer the ship of state for at least the next 4 years. As Trump reached out his hand and swore to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, his close friend and inaugural committee chair, Tom Barack, stood behind him, smiling in a blue scarf and black overcoat. Afterward, Barack and Trump embraced at the U.S. Capitol's inaugural platform. The homewreckers had arrived. Barack didn't take an official position in the Trump administration, reportedly turning down an offer to be White House Chief of Staff, Treasury Secretary, or Ambassador to Mexico. Roger Stone told me he could have had any position he wanted, but working for the government would have meant making a lot less money. I don't think he has the belly for public service, Stone observed. Other homewreckers had no such qualms. If they changed the rules of the game now, they could make more money later. Steve Mnuchin, by now dubbed the foreclosure king by his critics, was confirmed as Treasury Secretary. His top deputy at One West, the bank, Joseph Otting, became the nation's chief bank regulator, the comptroller of the currency. Wilbur Ross, the bankruptcy tycoon who bought Florida's Bank United, became the Commerce Secretary, charged with everything from negotiating trade deals to overseeing the U.S. Census. Steve Schwarzman, the chairman of Blackstone, became chair of the White House's Strategic and Policy Forum, a group of business leaders who were to meet regularly with Trump. Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan Chase was named vice chair. Though the group disbanded over the summer after Trump's statement that bigotry and violence on many sides were responsible for a white nationalist killing a counter-protester in Charlottesville, Virginia, Schwarzman, along with Barack, is said to be among a small group of outsiders, including Sean Hannity, who are put directly through to the president rather than being routed through the normal communications channels. Hannity reportedly chats with Trump nightly. Schwarzman has flown on Air Force One. On February 12, 2017, less than a month into Trump's presidency, while the commander-in-chief was dining with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan at his Mar-a-Lago golf club, Schwarzman threw a massive 70th birthday bash at his Four Winds estate, barely a mile and a half away. This time, neither Donald nor Melania Trump could make it, but daughter Ivanka and son-in-law Jared Kushner did, along with Mnuchin, Ross, and a who's who of high finance and culture, from Henry Kravis, co-founder of the hostile takeover firm Kohlberg Kravis Roberts, to the fashion designer Donatella Versace. The party featured live camels, trapeze artists, fireworks, and a gondolier. Schwarzman's tennis courts were covered with Asian-themed staging. The man who'd hired Patti LaBelle to sing Happy Birthday for his 60th was serenaded by Gwen Stefani on his 70th. After Happy Birthday, the peroxide pop star took a, quote, a quick twirl with the birthday boy around a dance floor constructed inside a two-story tent where acrobats shimmied and jumped, the New York Times reported. Unlike a decade before, when Schwarzman's glorious pre-bust bash sparked condemnation from sources as conservative as the Wall Street Journal, this time the festivities sparked very little blowback. In her story, Bloomberg reporter Amanda Gordon reveled in the comparison with Schwarzman's 60th. There were some differences, though. She wrote, "Remember that beautiful fur coat on Melania Trump? It was New York in February on a weeknight. This time, no bundling required, with many folks golfing and swimming all day before a balmy night and fireworks alongside a full moon." Howard Marks, the co-chairman of Oak Tree Capital, a vulture firm that had bought and flipped 3,000 foreclosures, told Gordon, quote, "The world is an uncertain place. A lot of people are unhappy with a lot of other people. There are a lot of things that people are upset about. So it's nice to have an evening where everybody's happy, harmonious, and upbeat." End quote. There was a lot of celebrating to be had. In June, the gang got together for the marriage of Steve Mnuchin and his third wife, actress Louise Linton, almost 2 decades younger than him. And then it continues from there. The book is Homewreckers by Aaron Glantz. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. So we've got a new video up about the Senate Leadership Fund and the Congressional Leadership Fund, the SLF and the CLF. Nice, innocent-sounding names, right? Leadership funds and Senate and Congress, but they're Republican super PACs.
that are taking millions and millions of dollars from fossil fuel and other dirty industries and from right-wing billionaires and recycling that money directly into the campaigns. In fact, in several cases, actually running on the ground, get out the vote efforts for Republican members of Congress, running the entire television operation for some of these members of Congress. Lauren Boebert received over $900,000 from the Congressional Leadership Fund so that she could take the 3rd District of Colorado. It's an amazing story. They spent $437 million just in the last election. This is poisoning this money, poisoning our democracy. It's all over at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Sean in Albion, Washington. Hey, Sean, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, this isn't a rhetorical question. I really want to scratch your brain. Have conservatives ever been on the right side of history? Because I've been thinking about it, and conservatives, those who don't want anything to change and don't want any kind of progress into something, have, best I can recall, been against every positive change in America, from the Revolution up to more, health care for all. In my lifetime alone, I saw conservatives freaking out about integration and busing in Boston, anti-women in the workforce, and, of course, anti-gay stuff, anti-school lunch programs. And I really can't think of anything when conservatives have been on the side of equality or making life better for people in America. And this isn't a Republican versus Democrat thing, because both of those parties have changed drastically over the decades. So have conservatives ever been on the right side of history? And listen to your answer off air.
Well, it's a great question, Sean. I'm trying to think. I mean, I was going to say, well, Dwight Eisenhower was okay, but he wasn't a conservative. He was a fairly liberal Republican. There were a lot of them back then. I think your point is well made. What that would really mean, though, is that those people, that we have to redefine the word conservative. If you look in a dictionary under the word conservative, what you will find is that the definition of it is a political position that is in favor of progress, but in careful, incremental, gradual steps. And I think that we need to redefine the political context for the word conservative to mean instead in favor of maintaining the status quo, or even reversing the status quo to a previous status quo, which would make them not conservatives, but reactionaries. They're reacting against progress, and they want to go back to what used to be. And I think that that's very much what we're seeing in the American political scene right now is reactionaries. You're seeing people who want to go back to the days when schools were not integrated, when communities were not integrated, when the workplace protections of people across the spectrum were not in place, when pollution protections. It just goes on and on and on, right? You just go through the list. So I would say that the definition of conservative is what's lacking. For example, the conservatives who didn't want to fight the revolution, and you're absolutely right. There was about a third of Americans who were in favor of the revolution, about a third who were opposed. Those who were opposed called themselves conservatives. And there was about a third who just were like, yeah, whichever one. And that's, we were able to swing that middle third, and that's how we won the revolution. But Jimmy Carter actually wrote a novel, that kind of highlights all this stuff. But I would say that they weren't so much in favor of small, gradual, incremental change as they were in favor of the British aristocracy, of leaving things the way they were, because most of the conservatives of that era, of the 1770s, had huge financial interests tied in with Great Britain. And so what you see is that more often than not, people who call themselves conservatives are actually, they're either playing out racial interests or financial interests. So I think you're probably right. There's probably not a whole lot of conservatives that were on the right side of history. Gary in Alpharetta, Georgia. Hey, Gary, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Thom Hartmann. Thank you. I want to close with a quote, but before I do that, I got to do my Friday rant, if I may.
Sure.
This is reality, folks. We better, and you said it too, along with me and others. This is really serious. We got to wake up. Greed is no heart ever. It's America's greatest challenge. And we've got to stop rewarding wealth and rewarding the common men and women of this America who have built this country and are fighting the good fight. We got to stop rewarding wealth and rewarding good people and rewarding work.
Yeah, I'm with you, Gary.
We better wake up.
I'm with you. I'm with you. You're singing my song.
We better wake up. I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm watching you on Free Speech TV. Thank God for that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God I have that. Thank God I have a car. I got a roof over my head. I got a few dollars. I'm not an affluent person. I'm just thankful for all that.
Yeah.
But America has given me so much, and this is the only way I can give back, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And we're past, Tom. We are past the breaking point. I've come to that conclusion. We are past it. It's sad, but we're past it. Maybe that would be the challenge, to prove that it is a wrong statement. If we weren't past it, why is all this happening? Why do you get a caller saying that the President of the United States, who I've met personally too one time, is a madman?
Yeah. Yeah, I tried to, I tried to engage him in a conversation. Okay, specifically what, that Joe Biden did, do you think is ruining things? But, he just wanted to talk over me. He thought he was going to be a Fox News celebrity or something.
The quote is, he has a right, I think this was FDR, he has a right to criticize who has a heart to help. He has a right to help. Thom Hartmann has a right to criticize who has a heart to help.
Okay. Gary, thank you. Always nice to hear from you. Larry in Los Angeles. Hey, Larry, what's on your mind today?
Hey, that guy that was criticizing Biden so much, he was basically saying all of the talking points that you see on right-wing TV.
Oh, yeah.
I get to see Bannon every morning now. Somebody I had never seen on TV before, but after the insurrection, I get to see Bannon every morning on TV, and he's spouting the same garbage, the same big lies.
Mm-hmm.
When I called your radio program and told you that Donald Trump had added $8 trillion to the national debt, but at that morning, Bannon was talking about the $3.5 trillion that Biden wanted to add, and talking about like that was a huge number. The next day, Bannon upped it to $10 billion, and then 2 days later, it was like $30 billion. He was claiming that Biden was trying to spend.
Yeah. They ridicule people who live in the so-called fact-based world.
The big lie.
Yeah.
That's what
that's exactly what it
really
is.
Called about. That's all they're about is telling that big lie. And Bannon exhibited that in the last week and a half in talking about how much Biden wants to spend.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just amazing to listen to those guys up it from 3.5 to 10 trillion, and then 30 trillion, 35 trillion, I think was his last number that he was claiming that Biden was trying to spend.
Yeah. No, they just I've gotten
the big lie.
I've gotten 3 emails from Donald Trump since I started this program. I was just checking my email during the break, and every single one of them is literally repeating lies that he tells every single day. And I'm with you, Larry. This is their strategy. It is the big lie strategy that, I played that clip of FDR a minute ago, just laying it out. Frank in Lincoln City, Oregon. Hey, Frank, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Two important points. I think our best chances to get the Build Better Back bill through. Number one, you can't trust cinema. Apparently, I think according to Dave Sirota and some other people, she's talked to Gottheimer and some of the House folks, and their plan is to push their infrastructure bill only. And
Correct.
As soon as they get that passed, they're going to drop it, and they will not pass the triple B.
Oh, I know.
Now,
It's a 100% certainty.
Exactly. So we must not do that. And I think, the House progressives know that. But I think
they do.
The one chance. Thank you. I believe that the one chance to get, or the best chance to get, a Biden bill through, and we need it, is to tell Manchin and Sinema that they're only going to get the same percentage on their infrastructure bill as they're willing to give. In other words, they want 1.5 out of 3.5. That's about 42%. And then, or if they want to go to $2 trillion, that's out of the 3.5, that's 57%. So they will only get about 514 to 571 billion, not trillion, out of their infrastructure bill. If they want the whole thing, they need to give us the whole thing. What do you think of that?
I don't.
Call their bluff.
I understand what you're saying, Frank. I don't think that engaging in those kinds of, okay, if we do this, will you do that? If we go here, will you go there? I don't think that's going to work. I would not want to be Nancy Pelosi right now or Chuck Schumer. I mean, these two people have dug in their heels, and they're digging in their heels because they've got huge money behind them. I mean, Joe Manchin is a multi-millionaire, and Kyrsten Sinema wants to become one. And I believe that that's 100% of what this is all about. And I don't think it's going to change. Frank, thank you for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We may have to wait, or maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. There's a lot at stake here. And welcome back, Greg in Seattle. Hey, Greg, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Like a lot of people, I'm kind of wondering why the Justice Department isn't going after Trump. And I'm wondering if they are concerned that using the power of the Justice Department to go after a political opponent, the opposition, the former president, could backfire on them if they're concerned that, it would look like, who knows, there could even be an argument that is it even constitutionally legal to go after a political opponent? I don't know. What do you think?
It is constitutionally legal, and I think that your analysis is accurate, Greg. I think that probably the main thing that is holding back the Justice Department is the fear of looking like they've been politicized. And it's a legitimate concern. I believe the first, really modern, fully developed democracy to have prosecuted a former president was France. They just prosecuted Sarkozy. He got serious time in jail. And the kicker to that is that it took them, a decade to get around to it? I mean, it took quite a while. And Trump, of course, just thinks he can run off the clock.
And can you imagine how Trump would spin that? Yeah. Oh, my God. Yeah. Obama was spying on me.
Oh, he wants to be the victim so bad?
Aye. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot for the call, Greg. Good to hear from you. Keno in Lakeland, Florida. Hey, Keno, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. Want to get your reaction. And I'm concerned about computers' effect on our society. And have you heard, and what is your reaction? China has prohibited young people and teenagers from using their electronic devices Monday through Friday, and on the weekend they can only use it for 3 hours.
I know.
So in our country, our young people are being consumed by their electronic devices. So have you heard of this, and what's your reaction to it?
I have, and we're not an authoritarian, autocratic country, so we can't just, tell kids what they can and can't do. But what we could do is we could tell the social media companies, you have to dial back the addictiveness of your algorithms. Turn social media into basically bulletin boards. Turn it back into what it was during the days of America Online and CompuServe, where posts are listed chronologically or categorized by category, but you're not being pushed into things that are progressively more and more insane, which is basically the strategy that the algorithm that Facebook uses is doing, and YouTube as well. And instead, these algorithms can be designed to be highly addictive, which is what they're pushing right now, or they can be designed to simply be fact-based, to be informational, to be useful. And back when the major search thing was Alta Vista, if you're old enough to remember that, nobody was pushing anything. Back to you,
Tom. Do you think that they will be on their own, or will ever be forced to change their algorithms so as not to be addictive?
They will not do it as long as they're making money doing it. This is why Facebook is running ads on TV right now, trying to clean up their reputation and offload the responsibility onto the government, saying, well, let's change Section 230, of the Telecommunications Act, which could, affect the algorithms. They're saying we want government action. We're not going to do it ourselves. We can't help ourselves. We're addicted to being, to making billions of dollars in profits every year. So I don't hold a lot of hope for it, Keno. We've got to act. Thank you very much for the call. We'll be right back. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. So for this week's special video, for the supporters of our program that we put up over at ThomHartmann.com, I stepped into the Wayback Machine, and it's really remarkable when you go back over what President Obama accomplished, and the Democrats in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, what they accomplished between 2008 and 2010 when they controlled Congress and the White House versus everything that the Republicans blocked. I mean, the Democrats in those 2 years, they saved Chrysler, they saved General Motors, they turned 800,000 monthly job losses into job gains. They increased spending and education spending, decreased the cost of student loans, all kinds of great stuff. But then when the Republicans took over, they blocked a veterans job bill, they blocked Wall Street reform, they blocked immigration reform, they blocked political ad disclosure. And this is just a little tip of the iceberg. You can see the whole video over at ThomHartmann.com. Okay, welcome back. Margie in Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I'd like to talk about these supposed pro-fetus whatever bills, which have nothing to do with pro-life. The only thing they have to do is to control women's bodies. And we need to start making sure we are framing it that way. Because if it continues to happen, keeps going, there's going to come a point where women of childbearing age will not be allowed to do anything that may have the potential of harming a fetus, because these right-wingers are trying to make personhood bills where as soon as an egg is implanted, that is a person and must be protected. Therefore, if a woman of childbearing age doesn't know that she could be pregnant, is she going to be allowed to smoke? Is she going to be allowed to take medications for medical conditions? Is she going to be allowed to have chemo if she has cancer? Because that chemo could damage a fetus. By the way, if this sounds insane, this happens in other countries. And it's coming here if we don't stop it.
Yeah, I get it, Margie. It's almost like we're going back to the old homunculus theory days, before they figured out that eggs and sperm, got together and produced babies. Maybe 200 years ago, I don't know the exact time frame. But for thousands of years, the assumption was that sperm contained little, tiny, fully formed baby, only super miniature, and that women were basically toaster ovens. Their function was simply to be there to grow the baby, and which was the man's. And therefore, the men had to control everything, and because after all, it's their little homunculus, which is the old word for miniature human. And it's all about power. I'm with you. I'm with you. Margie, thank you very much. Very well said. Lori in Ocala, Florida. Hey, Lori, what's up?
Hey, happy Friday.
Thank you. TGIF.
Yes, TGIF. And we need to do something about these election laws that are coming to be, because we can't stand for it. As a matter of fact, all of these citizens in the 48 states that have these new laws have standing to sue, but they don't have time to sue each and every individual state. we got a law that was enacted 2013, I think it was. The Supreme Court gutted the Civil Rights Act that elected senators voted into law.
Yeah, in the Shelby
98%,
County decision.
That was a law.
Yeah.
Yes, now that was a law that the people voted for their representatives to vote for. And that law should be held today, but it's not, for no reason. Nobody voted for anybody to get rid of the law. So we need Joe Biden to enact an executive order, effective immediately, to put a 4-year hold on all state election voting changes. There's no other way around this. We need an executive order a la Donald Trump. And we need it to be bigly. I don't know what it is. I've just kind of thought of this today. But we really need to get our act together.
I don't think the president has the authority to do that to the states.
So?
Yeah, the executive orders can only affect executive branch agencies. So, Biden could order the FCC to do something or the Federal Trade Commission to do something, but he can't order Texas to do something. That's a limit on presidential power.
We're interwoven. We're interwoven at the election law.
I understand that conceptually, Lori, but I'm telling you, the law is very, very clear. Executive orders, the president does not have the power to order a state to do something. A state governor can. I mean, Greg Abbott has done a number of things down in Texas by executive order, but they would apply to Texas. But the only federal agency, the only federal group that can change the law in such a way that states can't do things like you're describing is the legislature. Legislation has to originate in the House, be approved by the Senate, sent to the president for his signature, then it becomes law, and then it can be overseen by the Supreme Court even. And that's it. That's all we've got. So. And
then the Supreme Court changed that. They got rid of a law that we all voted on. Mm-hmm. Our representatives voted for it. And so what's the recourse for all of the people in those states that actually have standing? They won't have time to sue because there is no reason to create these laws. They won't have time. So how do they seek justice?
Yeah, well, we can't. I mean, that's the problem. We have to seek justice at the ballot box, and that's why the Republicans are targeting the ballot box. Hey, special thanks to Louise Hartman, Sean Taylor, Nate Atwell, Jamie Holly, Joyce the Hammer, Nance, Nigel Peacock, Sue Nethercutt, Patrick White, Geraldine Halbert, Ron Hartenbaugh, Chase Sposs, Nicholas Pillard, Pat Sweeney, Jabbermaki, Jay LeBlanc, Connor Arroyo, and Carna Verde for helping us keep this program going and rolling. And thanks to you. Thank you in particular for those of you who reach out to our radio stations or our affiliates, our advertisers, and let them know that you're listening. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Keep getting out there, right? Tag you're in. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery, CBD for sleep and pain relief. More info is available at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Ground News, a well-rounded perspective for news readers. More info at ground.news/Tom. Angie, for any project on your to-do list. More info at Angie.com. Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at Dinovite.com. And ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom.